Yo, what is up, guys? How's it going? I hope you are super psyched because I'm super psyched. Got an awesome lineup today for the great tank debate. I have not been in an audio call with these many people better at playing tank than me for quite a while, so it's going to be a nice little experience, a humbling experience, I'm sure. But yeah, we're awesome lineup here today. I've got with me, below me, Flats. Flats, say what's up to the peeps. We
How
got
are you guys?
Forgiving in the bottom left, my bottom
Yo,
left.
what up?
And we got Freedo, my friend and co-host, on the left side of me. So what's up, Freedo?
Back again. What's up, everybody?
All right, good to be back. Good to be back for another group up call. Nice. Flats, Freedo, and Forgiving. F's in the call, but hopefully no F's in the chat. All right, so what we got here, welcome everyone coming from whatever sources you're coming from. This is the Great Tank Debate. So the way this works is each one of us is going to represent two tank heroes, and we're all going to kind of present our cases for why we think the tank we are assigned to deserves a buff, a nerf, or just to stay where they are. And then we're going to kind of vibe off each other what we got to say, what our hot takes and sometimes cold takes, and we'll just kind of discuss and yeah, see where we get on that issue. So guys, I hope you're ready. Hope you're psyched.
Oh, I'm ready.
Oh, we got Flats has promised some spicy takes, so I'm looking forward to whenever I ask Flats to pull the trigger. But in sort of in the spirit of making things easier, I'll start as the host. So I'll kick us off with a bit of discussion on Winston. So Winston, I have actually been doing an unranked GM Winston recently, so I've had a good bit of experience of Winston on like multiple ranks. I think he's a very interesting case. I actually think, and this is my conclusion sort of one word summary is, I think he's actually in a very good spot. I think Winston's actually in a very good spot. I think he's a very in fact, I think he's one of the best balanced heroes in Overwatch. The problem is that he doesn't seem that way a lot of the times because other heroes are really shittily balanced. That's my take. I think that the reason I say that is I think that he's a hero who is not like, he doesn't provide value just by existing, which I think is one of the problems that we've seen a lot in Overwatch. And I won't use the term that begins with P and C with two words.
Why not? It's a great term.
Okay. I'm sure we'll touch on that.
Tattooed. You want to...
I'm sure we will bring that up at some point. But I think a lot of heroes, because of the way balancing has been done, have reached a point where sometimes just existing as a hero is so powerful for that X hero that you'd be a moron not to pick that hero, essentially, in whatever game you're playing. They're just so strong just by their value, like Flats might be suggesting there. So that has skewed our perception, I think, in a lot of ways of what is like meta was a balanced heroes. I think Winston is not that. I think Winston, he can be a really hard counter, as Widow mains in chat might agree with, and previous Genji, I think buffed Genji actually really holds his own against Winston. He really fucks up new Winston, or regular Winston. But again, Genji, another hero, Hanzo. So he has this potential to be a great counter pick, a great sort of answer. He can take over games. We were kind of talking off stream that if you're like in plat and you've got a really good Winston, he will just take over. He will just kill your backline. You got nothing you can do. But he's also easily counterplayed against. You know, a good Reaper, good Roadhog. He's fucking your Winston every day of the week. So he's in a really good state, I think. Just the problem is we don't really see it in ladder because unless you're playing that solo jump in the backline, pick off their supports Winston style, you're almost never going to get like people willing to play dive comp with you in most rungs of ladder. Maybe, you know, if you get a really good stack or you're a high GM and people know how to play, yeah, they'll dive with you maybe. But and you know, we're seeing that in pro level, like a lot of teams do still run the Winston on, particularly on specific maps. But unfortunately in ladder we don't really get to see a lot of that because I think a lot of other people are unbalanced. So my statement, Winston, well-balanced hero, but Overwatch, not balanced game. Okay, that's a clickbait title, but that's my summary.
I lost the plot in this. Are we supposed to all respond and then we move?
Yeah. Go ahead,
okay,
give your take.
So in response to that, I would say it's kind of cool the way you worded it because like Winston's where I think most players wish the game could be in terms of reasonable balance, but it's that so many other things get to an unreasonable level that they need other stuff to make them viable. Like I feel Winston's just hanging on a thread of playability where he's just so close to just being completely garbage, but due to a few factors, like I would say his interaction up against AoE healing or like Brig shield, like he can cleave past it. His bubble's kind of strong enough for him to play around on a couple maps, and his ult is still good. Like he's just barely there. Whereas a character like Reinhardt, they actually had to power creep up a bit to give him buffs that in other contexts might look outrageous with speed buff and steadfast is kind of remarkable. It's like, no, Rein is going to sustain in the front of the fight. We're just going to statistically make it so. Whereas Winston, like a similar buff might be like if his leap made him move faster, and all of a sudden like his leaps are going like Junkrat mine extra speed or something now that like instant. Like that would be a 2020 version of power creep on Winston that they could consider. I'm not saying do that because I would rather that the game get scaled down to Winston's level, but as maybe this conversation will unfold, I've kind of come around to just accept that Overwatch is about power creep, and we just sort of have to lean into it and enjoy it for what it's worth, because the game kind of doesn't make sense without it, and a lot of things can't be good at the same time without it as well. So I don't know where they go with Winston personally. I don't think you can touch him too much balance-wise, but it would be nice if we lived in a different era of Overwatch. But the truth is we live in a more complicated version of one. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, I'm 100% with that. I agree with the take of he's in a decent spot. The problem is with other heroes being a little bit overtuned. Something I want to point out is for anyone who follows Surefour, he put out a piece on Twitter the other day about effective HP and what the effective HP means. So to give a little brief, effective HP basically means if you're a tracer in the backline with no support and you're full HP, you have 150 HP. But if you're a Rein with 250 HP and your BAP and your Ana are pocketing you, your actually effective HP is closer to 500 because it's going to take a large amount of burst that's going to kill you. So how do you counteract that large amount of healing, large amount of burst damage? And we're in the cycle right now where we're kind of switching in between large amounts of burst damage and large amounts of healing. And Winston is someone who actually falls victim to that a lot because he's not a burst damage tank. And he only has 100 armor as opposed to some of the other ones that have 200-300 armor, which means that he's good at taking the first shot on the way in, but not much more. Meaning that unless it's a map like Numbani First, which Numbani First, he's actually very powerful on. If you've played against a very good Winston on Numbani First, you can sit there and go, wait a minute, Winston's actually OP. What is this? But if you play Winston on, say, Third Point, it's not as strong. It's still pretty decent, just because of the way the map's designed. But if you play Winston on, say, King's Row, you're just going to get blown up. Right. And what's the difference between those? Well, Winston's always been really good at controlling his high ground and being able to take fights really quickly, get back out, engage on somebody, lead the team in, finish a target, or at least be disruptive and then get back out. The problem now is with pull, rock, bash, flash, you name every CC in the game, there's so much burst damage that you could be done in an instant, which makes him, in my opinion, actually underpowered right now, but him as a hero is actually balanced, if that makes sense. There's not really ways that I think you could buff him without making him overtuned or make him, just make him dumb. I think that other heroes needs to be brought down to a level where he's actually better, as opposed to buffing him to a point where you're forcing a meta at that point.
Yeah, I'm at the same point with Winston currently. Is like he's in a good spot on his own, but he requires so many different hero picks on the team to help enable him, like a Diva Matrix or a ball to go in and bait CC for him to be able to make a great play himself overall. And then in terms of like solo queue, yeah, you can force it, go for that solo dive onto the backline of the supporter playing very split and not peeling for each other, which is very common in solo queue. We all know this. You're going to get a free kill, right? And that's where your value comes, splitting the team, separating them with primal when you get it, booping them off if you can, depending on the map. So it comes down to map dependency for Winston a lot of the time. He's not going to be hard meta with the current characters in the game ever, with like the CC, like Brig in general, like being a thing in the game. So other characters that be toned down, and we don't want to have this power creep, because if we give him any more armor, shorten his leap cooldown, give him more health on his shield, he'll just be overtuned overall.
I thought of too.
Go ahead, Freedo.
Sorry to add this in at the end, but like, oddly enough, Winston's Tesla cannon is an item in the game that wasn't designed for this era of Overwatch. Like, it was made many years ago. But nowadays in Overwatch, we have Brig's shield or BAP field behind two other shields. So him having cleave I feel is a really like understated reason why he's somewhat playable on like Gibraltar and Numbani and a few key maps, which is probably a good place for heroes to be, right? Like Symmetra is a similar way where there's a few maps you can play or otherwise sucks. But oddly enough, like that's a very key distinction. And as we'll get on with the conversation, like the meta tanks, Orisa and Sigma have insane damage. And I would even say Zarya's and D.Va's damage has been buffed to insane levels too, but because there's so many ways to block damage now that the number just doesn't matter. Like he sort of, because his weapons go through all those things or turns into Primal, and then Primal's pretty sick. Those things are kind of hanging on. So that's something I'm thinking about a lot in Overwatch. Now moving forward, there's so many interactions that have to be great. Like it can't just be statistically on paper it makes sense for the hero. You have to think about all the interactions in the game because there is so many that really matters.
Yeah, one other thing I want to add to this as well is that there's this other external element to the balance itself, and that is like the knowledge of the player base. And I do wonder, and I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this. I wonder if we've been just dependent on shields for too long as a player base now. Like if we think back to when
a year.
Yeah, like when was Winston like really like dive meta? We're talking like Overwatch League season 1, right? Like that was when dive was the meta.
And
but
goats,
even
back
but
in my
even
day,
then,
we
back
didn't even use a main shield. No.
Well, no, exactly. And I remember like those days, but even then, like a lot of people were still, quite heavily dependent on the Ryan Zarya. Like most people have just played Ryan Zarya for the majority of Overwatch's like lifespan. But doubly so now for the last God knows how long. It's just been either you play Ryan or you play double shield. And the knowledge base, like the way the community approaches the game and the way they see the default of the game is very shield centric. I'm sure we've all been in games where like you get in a game and someone's just like, switch Winston, need shield. Like the shield, we need a main tank, we need a main shield mentality is really, really deep in the community. So actually there's that other obstacle if you want to play Winston. This applies to like Wrecking Ball as well, who happens to be my other hero. But the same kind of caveat applies to them, where even if the hero is in a healthy spot, as we're kind of all roughly agreeing on, the hero's in a healthy spot, but there's an additional obstacle to actually playing that hero in ladder, which is that nobody really knows how to play with you because everybody's used to a completely different play style. So I don't know how you guys feel. Like, are we too dependent on shields as like the only way to play Overwatch?
I think there's two answers to that. One, that's very regional dependent. Korea actually is very much playing dive, from what I've been told, through both ladder and professional play. It's the style that they have more always fallen back upon, while we've always fallen back upon Ryan Zarya. I don't know, as someone who plays Ryan a ton, why that allure is more towards us, like, in like North America and in Europe too, where we want to play these heavy, slow tanks as opposed to really fast, more of like a light tank style. I think it's dependent on kind of what region you're in. But to your point though, is I've played games in GM Top 500 where I have teammates who have literally weren't GM for dive. So like if we have to play dive, they don't know how to do it. And unless they were watching Overwatch League season 1, when they were whatever rank they were at, they probably don't actually fundamentally understand how to. So I guess the way it has to be is, going back to an old meta. Let's say we go back to dive, right, and saying to the community like, oh, like, we had to try to convince them that this old meta is good, right? There might not be people that are like actually able to play it because it's been so long. I guess that would be honestly, in my opinion, a bigger struggle in a lot of ways than convincing them that it might be more viable. I guess the example that I think of when I think of that is when the devs said that Genji and Soldier were actually in a good spot. So everyone kind of for a week just started playing Genji and Soldier in GM and just said like, let's see what happens. And some people were like, yeah, it's actually not that bad, but still like not that great. And like it kind of died away pretty quick. I think people will eventually figure out what is the meta composition, or what is better over time, whether they like it or not. I think that people fight against double shield a lot, myself included. But we all know it's the better comp. So let's say a new comp came out where, let's say, D.Va Ryan again. Like D.Va Ryan was meta for 3 weeks before they nerfed him. Diva Ryan wasn't like, if you pick Diva and Ryan, would you be like, oh yeah, that's a great comp? You'd kind of be like, I guess it could work. Like, you got the DM and Ryan's not bad. Like, you can make it happen. I feel like people will always come back around to, once they've lost to something enough times, they're gonna go, okay, maybe that is pretty good. So like, I think it's getting to the point where, if you are talking about changing people's minds, they just have to learn the hard way, really.
So do you think the lure at the end of the day for double shields, like we've been doing it for a year, it's the easiest tank comp in the game to play? Like technically speaking, like yes, it takes some coordination to like get value off your pulls, combo with your pulls for your Orisa, like rocket, shoot it, flux off of it, whatever. But at the end of the day, is it easy to just plop down that shield and shoot out their tanks? And that's like the mindset a lot of players have right now, instead of thinking about how they can get in position to get onto the back line, get onto a DPS, how to counter them overall. It's just, oh, I see Widow project shield at them, forget about them for a bit, go back to shooting tanks, right? So I think it's just overall we have to change our mindset slightly.
That's true. However, I think in some ways the Overwatch League has ruined the game for the entire community because they legitimately find the best ways to play after grinding, 12 hours a day. And a point that I want to make is that the game isn't designed to allow you to play strats that are risky just by the way the time bank and snowball mechanics with ultimates work. It's not because I spend half my time playing Valorant and making content over there. A game that has round-based gameplay means that you're going to come into contact with the same choke or the same type of fight, or ignore it entirely because you want to take the bomb over here. Like, there's a lot of ways to mix up your strategy. Whereas in Overwatch, you have set positions every time that really you just need to take the most economical way to if you want a high percentage of winning anyway, right? Like, low percentages of winning get stomped down in Overwatch all the time just based on the format of the game. So this is, I'm not gonna jump too far into the hero bans draft discussions me and SVB love to have every single time I talk to him, but that's another reason why I love that so much, is because the format of the game itself doesn't really allow you to take those risks. So having like let's say you want to be Chengdu, yes, but Shanghai Dragons of last year beating Goats. Like, if you look in isolation, them in stage 3, they beat all the Goats teams, great. But they also had to lose along the way, like really badly, have a mediocre record on their way to perfect. Like, okay, we know every player in the position he's got to be in exactly, and they're popping off mechanically. Like, it takes all of those things to sort of culminate in that crescendo of it being even possible. So you always can have these high skill compositions have a chance up against something more reliable, but the problem is, like, that's not how Overwatch works, really, I guess. And until we have different game modes, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. So ultimately, the things with the best stats and the best ults, most reliable thing that you can keep doing is just going to work, because that's how the game's scored, essentially.
Yeah, it goes back to that idea of value, like what gets value, and kind of as we were alluding to, there's just easy value is always prioritized highly in Overwatch, and if 2 tanks give you easy value, why struggle, right? That's like why are you making it hard for yourself, man? Why are you playing Winston? Just play Orisa. Just do it. Just play it. And that's kind of
why play Winston into Brig? Isn't it?
Well, yeah.
You just pick Orisa and just pull her, right?
No, exactly, right. So that's I suppose a larger discussion, and we'll allude to that more. But I think let's move on to the next tank then, and let's go clockwise. So I'm gonna go down to Flats. Flats, I'll let you choose Reinhardt or Orisa. Go ahead, represent one of the cases for one of those 2 heroes, and shoot us what you got.
You know what? I'll go with my spicy one first. I'll say my ace.
I was hoping you would.
So we'll go with Orisa. I honestly think Orisa's in a good spot. I think balance-wise, she is in a decent spot with both damage, her pull, and her fortify. Now, I hate nothing more on the planet than her fortify and how it makes her the most unkillable thing on the face of the earth. But I don't think that's Orisa's problem. I think that's a problem more deeply rooted in supports, and more we talked about earlier with the effective HP and the burst healing, as opposed to healing over time. When the game was first released, we had Zen, Mercy, Lucio. And Lucio, I guess, technically had the closest thing to burst healing with his amp it up, I guess you would say, or trans, if you kind of transcendence, I guess. But over time, we've gotten to a point where burst healing is king, right? Armor pack, was a big, with not even talking about over armor, which thank God is gone. Throwing a few armor packs at your other support. I've had times when I'm playing Rein, and like just today, I was on a BAP alone. There was nobody else there, just finishing him, and I took 8 swings for me to kill this BAP because he just got armor packed and a fire strike. And the reason I killed him is because he was like 95 HP and healing, and he got hit by a fire strike and died. So like, if I was still swinging, I'd probably still be there swinging on him. Now,
some say
Orisa,
Flats is still swinging.
Yeah, Orisa gets her value, in my opinion, when there isn't another Orisa in the game. Okay, so if your team runs double shield with an Orisa, and the other team runs anything else without an Orisa, she brings extreme value, right? My favorite is whenever people lock Ball Hog against me or Ball Sigma or something like that. I use the pull with either my Hog or my Sigma or whatever to get great value out of her, right? And that is something that has always been deeply rooted in her kit ever since she was released. With you had pull pork meta with, you'd always run Orisa Hog on Ilya as well, and no one ever had a problem with Orisa pull on Ilya as well. People started to have a problem with Orisa when she was a must pick. And the reason she became a must pick, in my opinion, was because of Sigma being released with the double shield meta, and the double shield meta being backed by the same mentality that you had when Goats was around. Goats was such a good comp because it was all about sustain. Even if you lost fights in Goats, it took 3.5 minutes to lose because nobody would die. And especially as like in a defending team, that was worth it because you just kill time off the clock. When we rolled into double shield meta, we kept the same mentality. And the reason Orisa is still as strong as she is, I believe, is still because of Brig. Brig alone, sorry, I mean not Brig alone. Brig, a little bit of BAP as well, is what kind of brings her power out. Because when you make mistakes on Orisa, you just hit your fortified button, or even if you run out of cooldowns, you just existing, in a lot of ways we were just talking about earlier, is better than making a mistake on, say, Rein. Because if you make a mistake on Rein, you're most likely dead. You make a mistake on Orisa, you're most likely still alive, right? And I don't think that's deeply rooted with the hero's issue. I think that's the balance around her. Now, before to just finish off the point of it, because I know I'm saying something a little bit crazy. Back before a Brig was released, 2 shields was unheard of in Overwatch. If you ran Orisa Rein or I guess Winston Rein or Winston Orisa or anything, your team was considered borderline throwing, right? Shields did not equal win in Overwatch. And I think part of that was because of dive and because of Winston and because of how speed killed and how...
Well, D.Va was a must pick. Sorry to interrupt, but D.Va was like 99% pick rate, right, at the time?
D.Va's just the worst version of Sigma now.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Anyway.
But you could get past a lot of that stuff by playing fast, playing strong, and the shields themselves weren't that big of an issue over time. But the reason dives doesn't work anymore in the same way is because of Brig, right? In my mind, I feel like there should be like a rock paper scissors kind of thing, where poke comps can kind of destroy Rein Zarya because they have to take a long time to get there. Dive can beat the poke comps. But Rein Zarya can beat the dive because they're much slower based and more together, but they don't require like the same don't move mentality that like a double shield comp would have. You have a little bit more bending and flexibility. So I think that honestly, if you tune down Brig and maybe tune down Immortality Field a little bit, because I think BAP's in a decent spot right now, but he's still kind of strong with the burst healing effect just because of all the supports right now being a little overtuned. I think you would see double shield go away. I don't think Orisa herself is that bad. And if you play on places like Ilios well, I think Orisa's fun. I think she's not that bad. I think having to play Orisa constantly is not fun, and nobody enjoys it because you don't like playing her, and people don't like playing against her because you just get pulled, you headshot her, she never dies, it doesn't matter, nobody has fun. So I think we can get past it somehow, but it's not with Orisa, if that makes sense.
And just to illustrate what you are saying, Freedo shared a nice clip with me that I'm going to bring up on stream right now to kind of illustrate how difficult it is to kill a Brig when she wants to swing, even at a full HP Reinhardt. So we're gonna see here this little clip that the NYXL have shared of Jonak in a room with a Reinhardt who takes a mega health pack and still ends up losing this one-on-one with a rallying Brig. So yeah, now that we can all agree we hate Brig, I will let Freedo and Forgiving chime in.
Well, in
Go
that clip,
ahead.
actually, Baptiste is actually pocketing the Brig the entire time too, so that comes back to
yeah.
effective HP, and that duel with Rally popped on top of that. You're healing what, 75 healing per second with Rally armor and Brig pocketing. I mean, Bat pocketing you. So Flash was talking about how Orisa is currently not the problem, but it's like the supports overall. So I wanted to touch on, you were talking about they would need a nerf immortality field in some way. Do you have any like ideas behind like what they could actually change, like in terms of HP of immortality field, range of it, LOS, how it actually works, be more like a linear line instead of like a circle area? What are you kind of thinking when you go to that, or of what they could do? Even though we're talking about tanks, it kind of impacts Orisa overall. So
I think honestly, I have two things. I have one or the other. When I was talking about more of this rock paper scissors thing, kind of to Freedo's point earlier, we're kind of in this point where I think everybody agrees we need some global nerfs. If we're not getting the global nerfs and we're going to buff things a little bit, I think Winston's buff, like Reinhardt, would be that he does more damage to electronics, like Torb Turret or Immortality Field. In my rock paper scissors example, he would be doing much more damage to Immortality Field, whatever you say. Maybe it's double damage. Where Immortality Field is not up for nearly as long because, let's say you do a correct dive, right? And their Zen, or let's say the running Zen is 1 HP and the Immortality comes out. Boom, he's back up to 40, right? But that's not the key. It's not back up to 40. The key is he's back up to 40 for a few more seconds while you're pumping heals into him. So when it does die, he's probably at 90 HP, but your team's also collapsing to help. So like he's just unkillable, right? But if you reduce the amount of time that he's unkillable for with that Immortality Field, whether that's a Winston buff of making him do more damage, double damage to electronics, or you lower the HP of it, I think either one might lower the time to kill. Just the Immortality Field, which would roll over into killing other targets, and it would still be just as effective. When people use Immortality Field in my games, they always use it on like Sigma Flux, right?
yeah,
And it's never at the beginning.
Destroy it. Yeah,
It's right when the flux starts, like everyone's in the air, 1, 2, and then when they start coming down, the flux is the disc is thrown at the ground, it pops up, they hit the ground, and they always survive, right? Like it's a timing thing. I don't think it would destroy its value, but it would reduce how powerful it is on that initial burst, right? Since we're in such a point where burst is already so strong, where Winston isn't technically bursting anybody. You're bursting them as a team, and that's very different than Widowmaker bursting you. If Winston, D.Va, and Tracer burst you, you probably deserve to die, as opposed to, Hanzo one-tapped you from King's Row when you're on Eichenwald.
It's funny you say that because this entire era of power creep started because that was the meta of Winston, D.Va, and Tracer bursting you. That's why we have Brig. So it's interesting. So one, I do like, again, interactions. I said it before earlier. That's an idea of one that they have to go, basically. Like they have to start picking out heroes and saying you can be good at a specific thing, Sim cooking shields, or Winston on deployables, or now Ryan can't be booped as easily. Like they got to make the game more complicated. Otherwise, heroes just get left in the dust for sure. But I will say, just to sort of throw a wrench in your plans here, a problem with the way Blizzard sort of has been balancing things in general is that they really don't want heroes to be situational, despite what I just said about interactions. Okay, part of the problem with the Orisa rework that they did is that they were trying, I think, to make her more fun to play, to like convince the community that, no, this could be a cool hero that all the kids like hello fellow tank players. Insert meme here. But like her move speed went up, her stats went up. It's like, oh, she's gonna have extra health and she moves faster and fortifies better, and we're just gonna give you all these cool toys to play with. Please love me. Like that's like the plea that they were making with Orisa. And then, well, would you make a tank that was this high ground bunker tank into a brawler? Well, now you've just invaded on that space. And there was eras, if we think back, where Orisa on attack was like hilariously bad, so bad. Now, I know that a lot of ranked players in general will still feel she's pretty bad, but that's because you're not playing with teammates that set her up properly. Like it's still awkward now, but it's not bad, right? Like Torb on defense used to be bad. Now it's, you know, not as good, but can be done based on how they've designed the game. And that is good in some ways so that you feel less bad when you get a teammate on your team randomly in ranked who's picking a off meta hero, but it doesn't do so much for this like beautiful myriad of a meta that we want at a high level, right? It's like more of a average level player philosophy, I think. So I don't know how they fix that. Like I've been thinking about Orisa as well. And to your other points, it's like, well, Sigma's in the game and Batiste and Brigger in the game. There's no way we can like remove those elements from amplifying Orisa now. Like that's you can tune them down, and you know, like I said, interactions to counter it was probably the best way forward in my opinion. But it's not like we're gonna ever be in a world where there isn't Sig Orisa that have this natural synergy, or these backlines that have a shield and can duel, or this I can't die button. Like that's just the world we live in now. Even if we make those elements weaker, no matter what, like Orisa's going to be artificially buffed by that surrounding kit. So I don't necessarily have a solution to this, but I don't know. I think Orisa could use some nerfs, but I see your points. But there's no coming back from the world we live in now with all the context that helps make her be insane. Another thing as well that I was going to say, maybe we could talk about with Sigma, and which I think is on my list as well. But when we talk about the forgiving nature of comps, Orisa having that button that interacts, it's not just, you know, making a mistake. It's also, I don't die to an ultimate, right? Like that's such a huge thing. I mean, there's a whole era where Reaper was meta, partially because he just didn't die to ultimates or didn't die at all in general and could escape things. So it's almost as well, in order to Surefor's point, and as we said on the podcast so far, in order for damage to have a chance up against the crazy healing, those things have gone up. But now we're left as tank players to need a button to say, I can't die on the front line to just compete. So you know, it's hard to know where the dog chasing his tail begins, because it's a problem for everybody that just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning, and the power creep brigade just keeps moving up and up and up. And so yeah, ultimately to lean into power creep to make it playable for everyone, I think on poorly performing heroes, more interactions that are like niche case can have them be interesting rather than be like forgotten heroes in the cast. I think is probably the best way forward.
Forgiving, go ahead.
That's my rant.
What you got
If I had
to
to
say?
think about any nerfs overall, though, to Orisa, because you think that she possibly could be used in a nerf overall. So I think what we should be doing is, so we can agree current meta, Orisa Sigma, right? Very, very passive, poke comms, stuff like that. You play Ashe, burst damage is the king right now, right? So when we are thinking that, if we want to be forcing a different meta overall, like right now we do have some little bit of variations of Reinhardt, some maps we can play dive on, yada yada yada, and that's overall somewhat healthy for the game, but overall too much Orisa Sigma. Maps are very long LOSs, and every map that they've been adding to the game recently, like Paris, Horizon, are very, very long LOSs that
Blizzard
enable
World.
this Orisa
Junker
playstyle. So every map, I think it comes down to maps at the end of the day that are enabling this Orisa Sigma placement style at the end of the day, truthfully. And if they want to keep adding maps like this, and a lot of the map pool is Orisa Sig base, do I think we could do one small nerf to Orisa, like maybe fortify cooldown? You know how when she got hit with that initial nerf a while back, they actually reduced her 45 cooldown instead of increasing it. Everyone is expecting an increase there. They want to leave that 50% on that 45. I believe it's still 50.
It's 40 now, I believe.
It's 40?
But they
Okay.
nerfed it to 8 seconds, and they rebuffed it again they buffed it to 8 seconds, and then they nerfed it back to 10 seconds.
Okay, so truthfully, that's where I was thinking. I was like, if it was 50, go down to 40, go back to that 10-second cooldown. That's what I was thinking. So I don't really think she needs to be touched. I think it's the maps that are kind of enabling her in a way.
So there's a couple of different things that I want to kind of that have been touched on there. So Flats, I like what Flats suggests as well, which is a sort of a balanced philosophy where we're asking the devs to make certain decisions about what direction the game is like it works essentially. So kind of what Flats is suggesting relies on the devs to understand the rock paper scissors of the metas, right? Of like what you spelled out, Flats, with dive countering the double shield and the Ryan Zarya countering the dive. So to make a decision like Winston hurts mechanicals more, The devs have to understand that we would want to pick Winston against the mechanicals because he would be a comp that counters the mechanicals, right? He would be in a comp that counters the mechanicals. Personally, I don't really have faith in the devs to do that. That's maybe a bit mean on my part. So I really like that idea. I don't know how viable that is from what we've learned. Like I said, I think Freedo kind of said it well, that the devs just kind of like everyone should be playable all the time. And I like what Flat's saying. I like what Forgiving is saying as well, but I want to throw another element into this, which is fun. And I know that's shocking because who plays this game for fun anymore? But I would like to throw in the metric of how much value should heroes who are fun get compared to heroes who are not so fun. So what I mean by that is we can all agree as tank players that Orisa is not so fun. Why? Because it's just a very passive play style. It doesn't really require you to do much. It's not a very active way of playing. And when we had the great support debate, I made an argument for Mora that I'm okay with Mora being a middling value pick all the time because she's just kind of boring and easy, right? She's just like hold left click, hold right click, throw orb. It's fairly straightforward. You can pick it up quite quickly. No shade, Mora players, no shade. But that doesn't mean she should have to be meta at some point, right? If Mora is now the best healer, you've done something wrong because you've made a hero that's rather, you know, I don't want to use wrong terms that will offend people, but rather easy. You've done something wrong. The whole point of game balancement is supposed to be we reward heroes that are high skilled at the highest ranks. These get the most value. That's what we all understand is the theoretical best way of balancing. So similarly, I would argue that I would be fine for Orisa to be a middling pick all the time. A hero who's like, whenever you pick her, she'll generally do pretty decent, right? Like Mora, whenever you pick her, she'll get you decent healing all the time. Maybe Orisa should be the same. And in a way, she was that kind of hero back when she was the bunker meta pick. When you could pull her out, she was always solid, like always, you knew what you were going to get. She's going to give you a shield. She's going to be quite tanky. And I wonder if we should be thinking about those kind of terms as well when we think about balance, because really we should be thinking about if there's a hero like Winston, which requires you to really understand your limits as a tank player. You really have to know, can I survive this jump? Can I make this 5 seconds without my next jump? Can I live without using my bubble here? Will I have to pop primal? Like, these are decisions that tank players should have to make, and even like a Reinhardt has to make, right? Like, if I press shift here and I miss, am I fucked? Is my entire team going to lose this fight? These are really important things that, like, there should be consequences to decisions. And if there's a hero who doesn't have these consequences, we kind of alluded to with the shift, the fortify just being a get out of jail free card, then I'm fine with that hero existing. I'm fine with that hero having a get out jail free card, but then that hero should never be anywhere near top level meta. That hero should just always be a middling pick. So I wonder if we should have some fun in the stats of what we're balancing. I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot.
No, you're definitely not. I did want to say something to your point about the devs that I just wanted to remind everybody, especially the viewers, that the devs are a wide array of opinions, right? Like, they disagree all the time. So a guy that I got a chance to talk to, Josh No, for example, I would imagine he's a high level player, first of all, but also is into these kind of crazy interactions, right? Like, he's I hate to maybe throw him under the bus now, but he's responsible for the Torb rework. So, you know, the lava doing more damage to armor. Ideally, you know, we saw a semi-pro team use that to counter goats in a way, right? With what's the name?
Clockwork
Vendetta,
Vendetta.
right? So like,
Yeah.
you know, not a mainstream thing, but you can see the thought process there. So I wouldn't undersell their capability for doing that. It's just that overall, the design philosophy, they do want it to be simple, but I just think like that's, you know, years ago. It's too late for that. We're in a MOBA game, and that's an important term because the thing that none of us have said thus far, which I think has to be said, all Orisa's power is in Halt, which is one of the strongest MOBA abilities in the game, maybe the strongest. And it was only not the strongest when Defense Matrix was the most powerful thing. And somehow even though they've buffed that, I still haven't figured out the math on this, but it was back in the day that Halt was just easily eaten all the time. But now it seems like that's not the case. I haven't really figured out the reason for that yet, despite them buffing D.Va. But
The range,
yeah,
Putting yourself at a shield
It's also hard to
disadvantage is
eat.
the main thing currently by playing
Yeah.
D.Va instead of a Sigma overall. So
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I also think it's the support thing again. Back then, There wasn't Brig and Bap, I'm pretty sure. So that's probably another reason why. Okay, so that makes sense now. Like there's just more answers to dive. And that's sort of the complicated game we're getting into. But the problem is with Orisa, the most fun thing about her is Halt. So that's where they're left in an impossible situation. And I've been tossing this back. I've actually been writing up a thing about this to potentially submit to Blizzard. I don't know. It's sort of something that I type away furiously at night when I can't sleep, just angrily thinking about Orisa. But because like they went this route to make her cool, I don't think it worked. And like meanwhile, all of us, and I agree with you guys that, well, like, can you nerf her shield? Like, it fortifies much worse. She'll just get knocked over. And like, and there's all sorts of things that are really annoying to play as Orisa in the mid fight, like playing against a wrecking ball on well, just, I might as well just jump off the map already, right? I just hate, like, the skill set of outplaying a wrecking ball as Orisa is just lame, right? It's like, I gotta look behind me the whole time. Like, I don't like it at all. Like, those interactions suck, but they all suck. And those stats are like, middling, maybe not as good as Ryan, who just like goes in and plows you over, right? Because Halt is so incredible at everything. And the answer is I think either there's more things in the game that get added that like compete on that level of MOBA-esque value, or you nerf it and then make her more boring. So I don't know what to do. I've said this before, I think, to SVB as well, but the weird thing about Halt is that in a MOBA game, it would be considered like one of the top flight skill shot abilities. Like the MOBA characters that have things like that, it's like they're your whole setup and it's respected. But in our community, it's like, oh, Resident Sleeper, just toss it at the enemy team. And I always loved playing Orisa for Halt when she was counter meta, because Goats was meta at the time. So playing to set up damage was this like edgy thing that you're like, I'm being a hipster in doing it, and it was cooler in my eyes because Goats was so much easier to play. But now it's the case that you're forced to play damage anyway, and damage have been getting buffed repeatedly, that now it's like the context of Halt's strength is just in a completely different space. And I don't know what to say, because at the same time, the support survivability is so strong that without a tool like Halt, well, fighting can get kind of obnoxious. So ultimately, I don't even know what I want. I think she could be nerfed, but I don't, I don't have I'm not brave in what direction. Like, she definitely would be boring if you just all of a sudden made Halt like feel a lot worse. And even if I think Dante said on his stream recently, I saw it in a clip, but reducing or increasing its cooldown just makes it harder to play, like the value you get from it. So then you got to start thinking about what the radius it pulls you in at. Then it's like, well, you got to aim it a bit better. It's more so it does a thing that is really strong. And I think a combination as well of the DPS buffs as well as the rigidity of the backline means that we can have these flankers that don't need help. Years ago, back in the day, a Genji would be terrified to be taking the EQO flanks that he's doing in the grand finals by himself. But because now, you got extra damage and reflect cancel and all of this because of the power creep of the game, those like movement teamwork abilities aren't as required. And myself of years ago, seeing how double shield gets played now, I'd be completely shocked at how much value you can get. Like, it made sense when Tracer could solo do it. She was like the exception to that rule. Now it feels like a lot of DPS can do that and get away with it. I think that's something that a lot of high players forget, that in normal ranked, they don't even see everything we're talking about right now with the double shield mode being a problem. They don't understand because they need that shield in front of them. They need that Rhine. And so it goes back to what SB was saying. Like, double shield feels almost as bad to them as dive does, because they need that Rhine shield in front to protect. Otherwise, they don't get anything done. Whereas pro DPS and high level DPS that you guys play around, and I sometimes, if I grind the ladder hard enough, they're good enough on their own to go off and without needing much help, right? Like, you watch Samito stream in the double shield meta, dominating his Doomfist. He's playing like a single player game. He's playing solitaire, pull, and then he goes in and he's playing 1v6 basically, and the tanks are like almost AFK, spamming away. And it's a weird place that we've moved to. I don't necessarily have a solution to that either. I think moving the tanks away from being about movement was kind of a mistake. And I'll get further into this rant, I think, when I get to my pick. So I don't want to hog mic time too much, but
pun intended, since you're representing Hog. I want to just add to the before I let Flats forgive me respond. I just want to add to the quick point you made about MOBA ability thing. I think that comes down to the nature of the top down versus the first person. I think in top down it's easier to see cooldowns coming, and therefore landing like one of those is much harder. Whereas it's super hard with everything you've got to track in Overwatch to watch for a slightly visible yellowish ball when you've got like the whole rainbow flying in your face all the time. But anyways, over to Flats are forgiving if they want to respond to anything that Freedo said.
Yeah, no, I'm with all of that. The thing I actually like to think about, especially for DPS, is if we weren't in roll lock, what would our meta look like? And I have a weird theory that I think we would be in a one tap meta where we would have like Hanzo, Ashe, Mercy, Ball. Which, spoiler before we get there, I think Ball is the only strong tank in the game. I think by himself is the only strong tank in the game. I think everyone else needs that partner for a lot of other things, but I think him alone like is on his own level, and I don't think that's necessarily bad, but we'll get to that later.
You've stolen something I wanted to say, Flats, but carry on.
I think that like, you know, I almost kind of question sometimes, why does it feel like there's now 6 at least DPS that in my opinion, that either feel like a tank buster or one tappers, right? And in my opinion, they're Genji now, Tracer, Widow, Hanzo. I'm blanking all of a sudden. Ashe, and I'm trying to think of the last one.
Doomfist against Winston at least.
Doomfist.
Echo Doomfist as well. Reaper May have some of my
Echo's kind of in that conversation, but like I actually hold Echo out of it just because like she's like a weird mix in there. Like she can one tap you, but like you kind of have to mess up now to get completely one tap by an Echo, or have no help, in my opinion.
Welcome to Platinum.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're not wrong. But yeah, like I feel like, you know, when we went to 2-2-2, we should have been, you know, balancing each role to have like power. But I feel like if we weren't in role lock, would DPS be this strong? Like would they be getting these outrageous buffs? I would say no. So like I think that's kind of like the whole point of right now is they don't necessarily not need the buffs, because like Genji was terrible for like a year and a half, 2 years, and it's nice to see some Genji play. But like I guess the core question is, why did we have to go about it that way? Like, was buffing him through the roof the answer? And necessarily, I just want to make it clear, I actually enjoy the Genji meta way more than May or Reaper or anything else. The Hanzo, like stuff we've been in before. Like this is way more fun. I just not a big fan of the way we went about it, I guess. That's how
Are you not a fan of how many buffs he got at once? Like, do you think they could have like only given him the deflect cancel, or just given him the damage increase initially, and seen like how it played off one buff initially instead of putting like multiple buffs at once?
Maybe.
What do you think?
I think for me, it's more like you know, as a tank player, you're not scared of many DPS players, like the heroes. Like May is probably someone that like almost every tank unanimously is like kind of scared of against. Just like, okay, I gotta make sure like I don't go in alone here because you're going to die. But now all of a sudden, I don't like facing Widow, Hanzo, Ashe, Tracer, Genji. Like it. I almost am like relieved when I like if I see Soldier Kree, I'm like, oh my god, safe. Like we're not gonna blow up. Like you might get like flash and right click, but like you got to mess up at that point. Like I know I can work against that, but like, you know, there's so many heroes all of a sudden that I feel like I'm terrified to play against because they're going to just make you explode, and I think that's the core problem more than anything. So like, I don't think it's necessarily the problem with Genji getting so many buffs at once. I think it's more of like all of a sudden it feels like Reaper was put in the game to be a tank buster. I feel like there's heroes that do better tank busting than Reaper now at the same range. You know what I mean? And they can also do long range.
Yeah, I completely agree with that overall, that a lot of like bursting capability has been getting buffed on a lot of different characters. Like Hanzo got a Storm Arrow back up to 70 damage recently from 60. They're making him overall better at peeling tanks, overall being able to duel at long range still, like contest the Widow in a way, yada yada yada. On top of that, Hanzo stems well with Orisa, like you can be ulting into your dragon. That's a good combo overall. So a lot of the tank busters in the game actually combo very well with Orisa and stem off being able to play behind that Orisa shield or behind that Sigma shield on an off angle, play with that Baptiste in that window and be pulling for that window, and everyone can get that hard burst damage. So every ability that they've been implementing in the game and like buffing overall is just very good with this very passive poking, using window, using BAP. Your effective HP is very high, and you feel like you have to play these characters that can rely on these like AoE healing abilities for you to be able to live at all. Like you need that damage reduction of having 2 shields or having Fortify or having Grasp with Sigma. Otherwise, you just get blown up. And we feel like we have to have a shield.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing here quickly before we move on to Forgiving and his pick of Diva Zarya, because I do want to cycle through the heroes. But one thing, I saw like a Reddit post the other day, and it got quite a lot of traction by the looks of it about a lot of players. And again, when we have these discussions, I know we gravitate towards the higher end, and it makes sense. You know, we often experience the higher end in our latter games, so we're talking about what we see and what we see in Overwatch League. But we do have to bear in mind as well the majority of the player base don't ever see that. Like Freedo's kind of alluded to, they don't ever see double shield. And I host pugs on my server, and I see people play all the time, and I almost never see double shield. And every time I see double shield, it's played really badly, and it gets like rolled by the Ryan Zarya or the dive, like almost every time without fail. And one thing this Reddit post talking about was, it felt like to them, this person making the post, that as a tank you're either always at full HP or you're basically critical and desperately trying to survive. Because the argument being made was basically the burst, it was kind of alluded to, the burst damage so strong now that basically you're either like, yeah, I'm good, I can put my shield down, and then you put your shield down, whoop, 400 damage in one hit, and now you're like, oh, please heal me. So do you guys feel that as well? Do you feel like that has affected you as a tank player? Like, are you always worried, like, oh shit, if I put my shield down for a second, I'm gonna get like deleted to 100 in no time?
Yeah, I think
100%.
it does 100%, because nowadays, like as Reinhardt, for example, me and Flash play a lot of Reinhardt. Once we don't have our armor, we're at 300 HP on Reinhardt. We already know that we can't risk dropping that shield when there's a Widow in play. Like we have to go try to break a corner, wait for our Sigma project shield, or hear him pop Grasp on top of us for us to be able to like drop our shield and swing again at all. In general, like we're so scared of getting bursted that we have to be thinking about where we can get our value. Like on Zarya, for example, if you don't have your bubble up, you're way more scared to play on the off angle or play slightly more aggressive if you don't have a bubble, more so than you used to be overall. So everyone just has to play a lot slower and a lot more scared.
Yeah.
Flats, you wanted to say something as well, I think. Oh, go ahead, Freedo.
Go ahead.
I think for me, like I think Emong, I do it with Emong a lot. I think his new favorite call out of mine is I got one tapped, because like at first, like I feel like he's like he used to call me on. I was like, dude, you didn't get one tapped. Like you're just too aggressive, because which is true. I have an extremely aggressive play style. Would have called, I guess, like high risk, high reward. Like I hit maybe 90% of my shatters, but I get shattered like 60% of the time. Like it's just kind of how it is. But in that same breath, there's so many times where like I have 500 HP and like I don't think I'm in that dangerous of a situation, and I start a fire strike, and like it starts the animation of like starting it down, and I'm dead before like it hasn't even left my arm, like my hand yet, and it's just like, what? Like, and it's not like I was standing in front of 6 people doing it, you know what I mean? Like I was standing in front of an Orisa, a BAP, a Brig, and then there was like snipers further back, but like there's also my whole team they're shooting at, you know what I mean? Like the way it's thought of is very different. Like, oh, you don't never drop shield here because I could take too much damage. Like the whole point of tanking is you want to take controlled damage, you know, where if I take a little bit of damage, that's ult charge for my supports, and that's great because support ults are fantastic, right? But like in very few worlds, like if I like made a severe mistake and I'm looking at a Hanzo and a Widow and they're both full charge looking at me, and I drop shield to start an animation like that, and there's other people shooting at me, I probably deserve to die. But way more often than just that, whether it's, you know, like a Genji through a left click, or he's close and throwing a right click as I started it, or whatever, a Widow, for example, I see a lot of Genji Widow, like I'll be dead before it even starts. And like, I guess like the best way to describe it is because like the way I'm describing right now is like, oh, like you clearly shouldn't do that in front of them, lol. But it's like, no, like I should be able to get away with that in front of them, because that's kind of like how it's always worked. Like it's been that way for years. It's just become very recently where it's a lot scarier and that's a lot faster you'll die. And it is constantly kind of like living on the edge, you know.
Like
and I'm not sure if that's a good place to be. No, you're good. Like, I don't know if that's a good place to be or what, but I can definitely say I get one tap way more now than I used to, and I'm not a big fan of it. I'll be honest.
Living on the edge. Yeah, I think something that's maybe hidden in what you said that an uninitiated tank player may not understand, that you sort of have to do that. Like, again, when you're playing Sigma Orisa, you can play at that range and be building ult or contributing to the fight from range and safety, whereas Rein inherently has built in that risk where you're not building ult, standing around, you're sort of just wasting shield. So Rein has that constant clock on him to do something and get value out of that time, or his team to make use of that shield, whereas Sig Orisa kind of break those rules. And part of the reason why I think so many people have problems with their design, or at least not their design, but their meta dominance, right? Where the risk reward isn't quite there with them because it's just like forgiving and power. But the problem Blizzard has, and this is to FVB's other point that he said, is that nobody knows how to play them except high level players. That's the thing. And this was in a very interesting experience that I had as well, where I've made a lot of meta calls right. But one that I was very wrong about is double shield being insane that it is. The reason why I was wrong about it is because if you play up against players that aren't very good at it, either the tanks themselves mechanically cannot perform the actions that high-level players can, or their teammates don't know how to play around it properly and the different resources you have, it looks terrible. And this is the problem where realistically, in some ways, okay, so the way they've reworked Sigma Orisa, lower shields, better cooldowns. So to me, this is actually kind of a mistake. In some ways, it's good because us having to play these mirrors, finally the shields get broken and you can make a play. Like, we're not just halting behind shields all day and letting Doomfist go in. That was terrible. Okay, I'm not saying that was good, but the good thing about that design for the average level of player is that they expect a bigger percentage of their output to be free, like to just like exist as Orisa, to literally just exist, just put a shield down, because they're barely aiming or hitting a halt well ever, right? And that's the issue. And now we're in a world where that's where the core of her value is in that brawling, is in that playmaking. And if you weren't making those plays before, you see what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to all of a sudden just start the tiers of play that weren't making them before aren't making them still, and they're just statistically worse. So that's where I think Blizzard's hesitancy is that friction point where, just like Brig, same thing. You could say all the same things about Brig as well, where like high level players, the nature of being a high level player is that you're going to figure out these things, whereas the average player mostly wants to play what they like and maybe doesn't have the same level of interest in actually improving or learning the game. And yeah, that's where Blizzard really has to decide if we're balancing who we're balancing for, and to actually commit to it, or make systems that like alleviate this being a problem.
Forgiving?
One day I'll get to interact with them.
I don't really have anything to add to that right now.
Okay, well, one thing I want to add to that as well is shit, I'm forgetting my train of thought. Oh yeah, so one of the things about playing tank and certain tank comps, so double shield is a good example of this, and again, one of the reasons why I think you don't see double shield basically in the metal ranks, as I call them, anything below diamond, is that it's a comp that requires the pairing, DPS, and support as well. Like, you can't run double shield but then have like Moira Lucio behind it and you've got like a Tracer flanking and a Sombra trying to hack people. It's just never going to work, right? You're just going to get rolled. And people get rolled and they don't understand why they got rolled, and they're like, I'm playing Orisa Sigma, what am I doing wrong? Like, clearly Reinhardt is actually better because he just walked on me and swung on me. And this is something I wasn't sure whether to bring up later, but since it's come up, I'll bring up now. I personally find that tank is one of the roles where people most expect you to pick X tank, but will not pick the heroes around that tank's comp. So people will like demand you to be like, go Reinhardt, but then they'll pick Tracer, and then they're like doing some other shit in the backline, right? They demand that you play what they want, but they don't understand that a composition, like a tank's main job is to enable a composition as a whole. And I don't think enough people understand the picks behind that composition. And so I think that's one of the reasons why double shield fails. But yeah, go ahead, guys. Do you think that that's true? Like, do tanks like are often forced on the picks and then people pick whatever the fuck they want behind it?
Sports got that
definitely.
feel
There's
great.
something I want to sneak in real quick as well, just to finish off my last point. Realize it's really important. To your point about making Orisa more like Moira, that's where I conclude all my little rant before. In that maybe we'd be better if we lived in a world where Orisa was the free value tank and we just got rid of all those skill things that high level players are abusing, because it's not working on both ends, right? Like it's too good up here and too bad down here. So maybe Sigma maybe is okay with the weak barrier and high skill shot abilities, but Orisa being balanced that way maybe it doesn't work. And to your other question, I definitely agree. I mean, I had a game on Hanamura where I was playing ball, and in my opinion, getting a ton of ball value on A. And meanwhile, the whole team's yelling at me to play Reinhardt, but we have a Junkrat on attack. Okay, like you can't hit anything. I mean, unless you flank. If you flank, you can. But so it's weird, the perception of players in their minds. Like it really is as literal as like they just want to feel the security blanket around them, right? They love overpowered MOBA stuff when it keeps them alive and they don't have to think about their play too much. It's the same reason why dive's really hard, because you have to, all the squishies have to think about their positioning in a much more like disciplined way. There isn't this like forgiving safety net around them.
Yeah, so going back to how you were talking about how people don't understand how heroes interact with each other, I feel like that is very common up until like Masters currently, and with how the player base is going. And I feel like most people can agree that the general skill level of the player base has gone down as players leave the game. As high level players leave the game, new people have to fill those shoes with those high level players, correct? So as a lot of people have quit and moved on to Valorant, people moved on to Apex initially. The skill level, a lot of people would say, is technically going down overall.
You
And
mean
a lot of
player
the new,
skill or the way the game's played?
well, I say some people say the new overall player skill, because of the new people joining the game don't have that experience yet. So people are leaving. There's new players coming in. Overall player skills dropping because experienced players leaving, new players coming in over time, right?
There's another
This
force
is,
where players do learn over time as well. Like if
yeah,
you kept
true.
playing, a lot of players have improved. But I
But
largely agree with you that with the population lower, the cap's kind of lower too.
But
Or
my
it's
thought
easier
process
to get
about
to,
that
like,
is the new
higher
players
ranks.
are only experiencing what is currently meta. Like they understand Orisa Sig is meta. They're like, tanks don't have many picks. These are the best tanks. I want these tanks every single game. They don't really think about why they're the best tanks though at the end of the day when they're new. They're like, okay, I can play anything with this. We can flank. They don't understand what comp enables each other in general. So a lot of people won't be playing that Hanzo, playing that Ash, playing things that spam shield overall. You'll still see people picking Lucio Zen with double shield, and like they seem very clueless on what supports enable this entire playstyle overall and how much healing they need, yada yada yada, the support going into it. So I think it's just as a general population of Overwatch, more people need to be educated on what is played with what for us to move forward overall.
I feel like a lot of that's just people just play what they want. You know what I mean? Like this, like
True.
I kind of like refuse to believe that someone doesn't understand that Zen Lucio isn't a great heal comp, but
you
it can make
sweet
it
child
work.
flat. You sweet summer child flats. You sweet summer child.
You like okay, like I have been smoked and rolled by Zen Lucio before, and there was actually like a weird 2-week period where Zen Brig was actually the support meta in GM. Like
yeah, hard dive with Brig.
it was like a weird 2-week thing, and and a lot of people didn't understand why it was meta. They were like what? Like there's not enough healing, but they would kill things so fast. Like you really didn't need the healing, and you just overpack your DPS anyway. So like your DPS were almost like tanks just running in. So like they would go in and they'd take damage like they normally would, while your tanks would also be moving in, and just nobody would die for a few seconds, and then you'd focus whatever was discorded, and they would die, and it moved on. I feel like the people that didn't understand that for those 2 weeks, either A, didn't play the game during those 2 weeks and just never saw it, or B, just didn't care. Like I hear your point. Like, I definitely think that so many good players leaving definitely has brought it down quite a bit. Like I can't tell you how many games now I have where I don't know anyone on my team, and that's kind of wasn't the thing. That wasn't the case 5-6 months ago, if not more. I kind of knew at least 3 or 4 people in the game almost every single game. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Yes and no. I don't think that necessarily makes them worse players. I think they kind of just have a different attitude of the game, and it makes the experience worse because they're having fun, but it's at the expense of everyone else, you know, because
True.
you know, I'm a firm believer that there is no such thing as really team play until like high diamond, because you just don't need it. Like you
Oh, you think
can
it's
kind of
that
roll your
low?
way through.
The thing is even higher.
I
Like,
think honestly, I think high diamond
Mm.
low masters is where you start to see what team play looks like for the first
I think
time.
it's around
the beginnings
4.2K.
of it.
4.2. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
would-
feel
I would
like
say,
a
like,
lot of people play it more
disagree,
solo queue up until then.
You know, I mean, like, I'm not even saying like you need any, like, you could have one other person in low masters and that's more team play than you'll see in anywhere in that rank.
True.
But regardless, though, like, to kind of just like circle back on all of it, you know, I guess I see what you mean. I just don't. I think that the player base will learn over time. I think the only time it becomes a problem is if we go like revert metas, like if we go play dive, and we have players that have never played dive before, or they were silver or plat when they played dive, so like they don't understand what it's like. I think that's where it can become a problem. But if we, let's say, had a new hero release and moved into some new meta where we played some new tank and ball together with Widow Tracer, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like people would learn it, you know, even those players that have come up through the ranks. I have faith that somewhat they would learn.
Okay, so you're talking about being worried about people being lower rank on dive, obviously. So that comes down to a question of, you know how we just saw that MMR reset that pushed us down to 3.9K. You can't place any higher than that. Everyone just instantly went back. It didn't really impact anyone. It wasn't a hard MMR reset. It was very, very soft, not very aggressive at all. Do you believe that we just need a hard MMR reset at the end of every season and then try to make more aggressive balance changes overall that try to force a different meta every season, and that should be our approach to the game?
I think you only get, if you're giving an MMR reset, you only give it to the GM players. That's the only people that want it and the only people that can understand it. If you give a full game reset, like, you remember that? Did you play that game that day when Roll Q came out and everything was
Oh,
busted?
God,
and we
yeah,
played
yeah,
on
yeah.
gold.
I
played in
I remember.
I played in a gold game, and dude, I played Hog, and I was the best Hog of all time. I look like 6 out there. Like those games wouldn't be fun for months, you know? Like, there'd be poor plat players and silver players and bronze players getting ranked in like a random GM game or like whatever it might be, and like those games would be just hectic for months. But if it's a GM MMR reset, I feel like everyone up top can kind of get their MMR back really easily, and, you know, like, throw us down to 3,800 next time. Why not? Like, I don't think anyone has a problem with, you know, there's only a few people that probably have problems with it up there.
The truth is, sorry, are you done?
Yeah,
My bad.
pretty much. No, you're good.
I love that point. The truth is, a lot of that people forget anyway, especially on low population times, GMs play in masters anyway. Technically, they're just expected
what I
to
was gonna
carry
get
them,
to.
right?
Mhm.
So if you have to go into masters, it's not much. It's not like you're having a widely different competitive experience. Also, just to be clear, so the viewers aren't confused, we were saying MMR reset, but really it was just an SR reset. It still
Yeah.
match made you based on
Yeah.
your hidden MMR behind the scenes. So that didn't change. MMR is a completely different number. Jeff Kaplan has said, I think there's like 7 points or something. I can't remember. It's like 5 or 7 points that you can be for it to determine which category you're in. And then that modifies your SR gains at lower ranks anyway. And big complicated thing. But so I think SR resets are great. MMR resets can be rough for the reasons that you said.
Yeah, I think if you
Ye-
did an MMR reset, like, to Forgiving's point, I think it's just for GM players. Like, I don't think I think you leave everyone else alone. I don't think they need an SR reset. I don't think they need an MMR reset. I think you give the GM players an MMR reset.
Yeah, at higher tiers, especially when you're competing for top 500 too. It was really lame that you could, like, I just placed and I'm #1 in the world. Like, what's the point of it then? So forcing you to be actively playing, I think, is a really big deal.
Yeah, I saw Plunk is rank 1, 161 games. I love it. I love to see it. It's great.
I also agree with what you said. I do again want to I want to try and keep in mind the majority of the player base. So when I say something, I'm trying to do my best to represent them. I think they would tell you that they would definitely want some resets in there. So obviously they don't want GMs in their game, but plat is hell. Plat is hell, and I
They're
think
the
people
ones who need it the least. They'd be the hurt
they
the most.
they needed the
by it,
least, but I also understand the argument of like why something like plat needs some. It's not again. It's not going to do well to have a full MMR reset or SR reset for everyone, because like I said, you don't want GMs and masters in your plat games. Although I know a lot of plat people say, "Well, I have Smurfs in my game anyways." SUB, but I I do also understand the argument that Plat is probably the most varied rank. Like there's just, other than maybe like once you get to GM, the difference between like 4.1 and 4.6. But in sort of regular ladder terms, like Plat is a shit show. So there's that. But
I think
oh, go ahead,
I
Flats.
think you should point that. You have been around for a while. You remember when I used to make coaching stuff forever ago?
Yeah.
So, you know how many people? I've met a good amount of people that like say they were like high silver, low gold. They place a new account, and all of a sudden they're 2,900. They're 2,900, and they're like, I deserve this rank. I go play 100 more games, see what happens. And it's like the way the game placed you it doesn't totally understand, right? Like it hasn't had enough data yet.
It also
like,
has
you
a
might have had some good
bias,
games.
well-documented bias of overplacing people on purpose, so that Smurfs are. It's this anti-Smurfing thing. The
Really?
goal
I
is
didn't know
to,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's well-known thing. Because like what is
Excellent.
are all so like to your point, right? The other it would be, is the placement system always off? Why is it consistently off, skewing high, right? Like you sort of have to put two and two together with that, where it's very, very consistently higher than you normally play at. And you're right. If you keep playing, it's pretty. The funny thing is, here's the thing with these players, right? What they don't know, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but at any level I play at, pretty much, the player placing is easily the worst in the lobby, usually. And it might be just because of inactivity, but like placement games,
Yeah.
dramatic drop in quality, right? For a number of reasons. And it's like they're testing the player's skills out and stuff. But yeah, people think they're playing well. This is an amazing thing. I've said SBB a million times, but people have absolutely no idea how to recognize how poorly they're actually playing. Like they think they're fitting it. It's like, oh, I'm getting a 50% win rate in plat. It's fine. Like I'm usually in golds, but I'm hanging in plat. You're not. Trust me. I've seen your gameplay. You're definitely not. You're
Mhm.
getting clowned and you're actually throwing. And luckily, sometimes you can float around and hang around in that rank. But anyway, sorry, rant over.
Yeah, this is just a slightly different discussion, and I've had it many times with players about like so many people tell me like, SVB have a second account, it's in plat, but I'm normally in gold. Does that mean I'm actually a plat? I'm sorry to break it to you, but anyways, that's like I said. Moving on. I do want to switch to the tanks. So forgiving, you've been waiting patiently. Hit me
I'm
up.
gonna
Which
start
tanks
with
you want to go?
Diva instead of Zarya because Diva hasn't been seeing as much playtime as Zarya does in lower ranks at least. Overall, Zarya's a tank that pairs well with Ryan. Diva pairs more well with Dive, and people are scared of overall playing Dive currently in this current meta due to burst damage, like we talked about on Winston earlier. So I actually think Diva could use actually a slight buff, truthfully, but at the same time, I think she could take a slight nerf in a way. I think we could be reducing overall her damage output with her micro missiles or some part of her kit overall for her overall burst damage herself if we were skewing down supports in a way that it would allow for this. Because if we were to give her more defense matrix, we remember 10-second defense matrix back in the day, right? During dive meta, holding it on the DPS, making them not be able to play the game. It's basically like putting a Sigma shield in their face right now, right? That's the equivalent. It feels the same way. Very oppressive, not fun to play against. The reasoning that I say this, if we were to keep everything the same way right now, with Sigma shield being as good as it is, with him also having a grasp ability, but when we get to Sig, I have some interesting points on that overall myself, if we wanted to change him, and then we wouldn't need this buff to Diva, in my opinion. But with the current meta of the game, I think Diva needs to be able to absorb more damage and have more of a skew with her, make her a little bit more unique with her defense matrix ability compared to Grasp, because Grasp right now gives you shield that you can take space with it, just like how you'd be able to take space with Matrix. Matrix is what, 3 seconds, I believe, currently that you have a Matrix.
Something like
You
that.
need
We
need to buff it by another like second and a half, in my opinion. If we want to be able to reduce the amount of damage for her to be competitive with Sigma in this current state of the game.
It's a big buff.
I know.
It's
Overall,
tough.
it's just I think if we get to Sigma, I'm gonna just share a little point on that right away. I think that he truthfully needs his graphs completely taken away and changing him in a different set if we want to keep him with a shield. I think Diva needs to be unique with having that matrix ability overall for her to have any viability in the game currently.
Yeah, I won't go too long on this because luckily we're reaching compounding points. Luckily, Diva, for all the reasons I'm like Winston's kind of hanging on because of some interactions. Diva's like the other way, where there's either shields in the way or immo field or whatever, so that even though her stats are pretty good on those things, it's like, well, but does she have a shield and do damage like Sigma? And because the answer is no, well, she doesn't have that much of a place. But I would say, interestingly enough, for all the reasons why double shield is sick at high tiers but feels hard to play at lower tiers, I think D.Va is better in contexts where positioning is poor, which I know is not a way to balance things, but like, if you can create some chaos, D.Va looks sick and insane. Like, you catch a guy out, or you help on a dive, or you keep a guy alive. In those niche scenarios, she's really good. So my fear would be in buffing her is that I think she just is catching, drawing the short straw, so to speak, in the meta. And I'd like to see what happens when we shake things up, because like it was said earlier, in prior years of Overwatch, having 2 shields was just trash, and now like I feel every 2 shield variant that you can think of is pretty good because of the characters that you have every option. Like even if you could toss a Winston in there, right, for the other reasons, but Sig, Orisa, and who am I forgetting?
Reinhardt,
right. All of them are so good at something that you're going to get those things they do and their shield. And so because of that, D.Va's just got too much to work through, I think.
I just, sorry for getting quickly. I just want to say, let's discuss D.Va and Sigma at the same time, because I think we've all kind of said in vague ways, like Sigma's like a better D.Va, so I think it might work well to kind of discuss them both at the same time. But go ahead, D.Va. Go ahead, Forgiving.
So when we also go to D.Va, a big time that she saw a big drop off overall in her playtime was when they actually nerfed her matrix range to go more with how the visual looked, because when they added that more increased visual, used the range by 2 meters over, actually hurt her a lot, because she has to invest more into going deeper to like matrix that monkey overall. So then you started seeing comps that were more like Winston Ball instead of Winston D.Va overall. That Ball can take less of a risk to go hard in, boop people opposition, then the team goes dive whoever they booped in overall. The Ball would be taking the risk overall instead of trying to enable the monkey to go make the play initially, right? So
range
overall, we need
might
to
be in order. That might work for me.
I think that would be like a good place to start on D.Va.
Yeah, range would be nice, especially because like, if you guys remember, old DM was kind of like weirdly buggy. Like you just didn't kind of it was like, like now you have like the little tri-beam thing. Like before it was just like, oh, it could be anywhere in this range and it'll eat it. Like, and you kind of didn't know, and it was kind of like, okay, like if you go anywhere near a D.Va, she's probably gonna eat it. Now you can see exactly always like where she is. I think actually one of the greatest examples, as in my experience playing Monkey, I've kind of tried to get my D.Vas to kind of like leave the ground before me a little bit, which was completely backwards from the way it used to be. Monkey always went first, and D.Va flew in.
It could be like a second or two after every single time.
Yeah, because because she flies slower, because his leap is much more like beeline kind of a thing. Where like if you beeline in with that new range and she's behind, even if she's DMing, you'll get blown up with burst damage before she even gets to you. Especially if you're taking shots on the way in. So honestly, I think a 1.5 second DM buff might be a little ambitious. Like
I know
I think
that was
scary,
Sigma wasn't.
I love the range one. I think range
the range one, because D.Va, her role is to play more of a peel role overall. Like you can go enable your front line, you can also peel hard for your back line and play counter dive. That was my big play on D.Va initially when I played the game, was peeling the tracer, blowing up the monkey back in dive meta. That's typically what you'd be doing, or you'd be looking to hard commit onto their Zenyatta back in the Mercy Zen dive back in the day. So you'd be choosing, do I want to blow up their monkey? Is their monkey playing split from their D.Va? You can like think about these things and how you'd be playing the comp. So you'd be playing pretty much in the middle of your team constantly, like a little bit behind your monkey, and then you're in the middle of the comp, right? Boom. So if she has that increased range, it's easier for her to overall peel for her backline, and that makes her slightly better than Sigma, because it's harder to project that shield and get on top of your Ana to matrix them on Sigma, obviously. So I think that push her more into the direction that she needs to go.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think whenever D.Va's been meta, it's been because of the DM. It's not the damage. It's not the like. You don't want D.Va to be a duelist, like go solo, go get kills. Like that's how I see a lot of people play D.Va in like gold or plat. But it's always been about whenever the high skill players get value out of it, it's always about eating stuff. So I think looking at that aspect is very important. Obviously, it's a fine line, because you don't want like defense matrix when it was just like, I remember when it was soldier meta and it was just D.Va and it was like tac visor and she just eats the whole tac visor, and it's like, why do I play this game anymore? But Yeah, I think it's a fine
Okay.
balance, but you do definitely want to buff DM. But also,
Yeah.
go ahead, Forgiving, go ahead.
So another point that if we were to say increase defense matrix, could they also be decreasing the time that it regenerates? So maybe it's more of like a resource that you have to be thinking more resourcefully about how you can use that to enable your run for the push. And that could be like an interesting thing that they could go into at the same time.
I'm always hesitant on that kind of stuff because I think the Widow change, the Widow Charger time change, that was just trash. I think I don't think you ever change a timing
Yeah, so like when they
on a
changed Hanzo
hero.
projectile, it's different timing. It felt kind of like ass
You,
overall.
you change like
You know,
years of like muscle
Mm.
memory at that point.
True.
You're completely changing like the way the hero interacts. I'm sure like every really good diva has in their brain already like how long it takes to get as much DM back without looking at it as they need. You would be changing
there's a
that
rhythm to
muscle
it.
memory. Yeah, like, I'm not a big fan of that. I'll be honest. I hate any change like that. Like the
I
Hanzo
didn't really
one, the
think
Widow
about that.
one. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones that were like big muscle memory changes, but I'm typically against those types of changes just because even if the state of the game is changing, that's like a core mechanic of the hero, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, fair. But let's also add Sigma into the mix, because I know, Forgiving, you kind of said like we need to, if we buff Diva, it needs to be proportionally with Sigma as well at the same time. Freedo, since you're kind of representing Sigma here, what thoughts do you have on the hero in his state?
Okay, so I think Forgiving said, his grasp is OP, and it definitely is, because if you think of other characters like, let's say, Overwatch 1.0 characters like Winston or Reinhardt, the Winston especially probably a better example. Like, he gets 1,000 HP on Primal. Back in the day, that was like, oh my god, it's so much health. How are you going to get through all that? I mean, now I think
Now
I've
it's like,
seen
thanks for the
Winston,
charge.
yeah, explode in half a second. It's like it's a negligible amount of HP, but Sigma has a comparable amount. I believe the max you get is 800, right? Or total
Yeah, it
health
is 800.
if you get a perfect one. And because there's so much insane spam, it's not even unreasonable to get to that amount. And so you might make an argument, well, tanks need that in order to compete with the damage, but you kind of, again, you get in that circular logic where you just never escape from it, where there's issues with him that I'm less confident on knowing how to fix. I think Orisa is a bit simpler because she's like viewed as this, people want her to be a main tank, and a lot of players just want to be able to set it and forget it. Whereas Sigma, I think we all know, is like the Roadhog of tank characters. He's like he's really mechanically demanding in order to even just shield a thing properly. And I think that's something that makes this balancing very tricky, because high-level players have just gotten better and better with that shield management, so much so that a character that I think is sick in ranked normally, Ana, looks trash at higher tiers, because the Sigma is just going to manage his shield so well that you're just not going to land your abilities ever. And so because of that, like the entire these are examples of things that I think the average player base just doesn't really think about when logicking out how the meta has panned out at higher tiers. So Sigma's ceiling is just too high overall with that. So because of that, he can't have inherent stats as well. So I would say he probably needs another look at with that. In fact, I would go so far, and this kind of hinges into my other character, which is Hog. I would wish that they stop trying to make these shield tanky type characters. I think we need more characters like Hog. And I don't know if we want to talk about Sig first, or let me go on a little Hog rant and then wrap them all together.
Well,
We're
let's
kinda
go.
in
Let's
speed
go.
up
Just
mode
go.
now,
Just
I
go
think.
in. Go in. Go in.
Okay. So in combination with Hog, so playing open queue made me realize something about the game that used to exist, where even though I love roll queue, and I think it was necessary and everything, one cool thing about open queue is that whatever problem your ranked randoms are dealing with in terms of jobs that they should be doing but don't know how to, or whatever, you can fix. You can overcompensate by picking any role, any hero out of the entire cast. So when we talk about these interactions and you need a specific thing to deal with a specific thing, well, you kind of need that option to be in your role in role lock, which is a bit of a problem. So I wish that Roadhog didn't suck, but I understand why Blizzard's like they're reluctant to make this solo queue-esque playstyle where he's just he is just a DPS flanker guy who like exists and pops off mechanically. But at the same time, I think the game needs characters like that for rank to not feel trash, because in DPS and support as well, I would say, I feel like there's every single style of gameplay you can go for to have different win conditions of like, I'm going to pick Widow and, pop off with mechanically, or I tend to play Reaper because he's easy and I can just like timing and engage and get a kill just based on timing alone and ability management. There's like that wide array in the other categories. Whereas in tank, I feel like we're really condensed, and then Roadhog's off to the side doing nothing. Meanwhile, Sigma is kind of similar mechanical skill, I think, but is getting this like super inflated value overall because his interactions are sick and he does more things for the team. And we just leave Hog off to the side and say, well, oh, you're not a team play character, so you just screw you. Like, this is a team play game. Luckily, to my desires, Jeff's made statements that like they're okay with the game moving away from like everything's got to be maximum team play all the time. And to that degree, I don't have like specific answers to this, but something to think about, an idea, right? Like, why does it make sense for Orisa's Fortify to be like insane and have a shield? Meanwhile, Roadhogs take a breather, like is multiple levels of suck compared to, in my opinion, because it gets canceled by everything, right? Like, you're not immune to CC. You don't have a shield, which means you're way more open for all manner of cooldowns, sleep darts, anti-nades, stuns, damage, whatever, right? Like, I feel like that should be flipped. And perhaps it's my involvement with a Riot developed game with Valorant that has made me like open my eyes to how other games get developed. But like, you sort of have to give characters that have pop-off style play styles opportunities to get in there, even if it's not as good, but just like let them shine. And I'd like to live in a world where Roadhog isn't this massive throw pick that you have to. I see him right now as what Genji was like pre-buff, where if you play perfect, it's gonna work. Okay, fine, but he's just so risky and unreliable that it sucks. And I wish like Sigma could come down and Roadhog could come up in that way, where we acknowledge they're both like mechanically demanding tanks, but get the interactions worked out. And I don't have off the top of my head all the answers on that. Like, for example, we might say Sigma would, just in the same way I'm saying Diva is like in a short straw right now. Maybe if like beam damage was the best, if they overbuffed Zarya, then maybe Sigma's grasp doesn't look as good because powerful beam damage is melting you, or Symmetra or something. But we don't live in that world, right? So because of that, I think he's got to get toned back. I'm not exactly sure what to do. I definitely, from watching old VODs of things, just like skimming through it, the game looks better when there isn't two shields. Like, that's sort of a weird aesthetic thing to say, but it's just visually crowded. It's great that they reduced the health on them. Big step forward. It was chaos to have double shields and a sim barrier.
And a sim, yeah.
We've all seen
6
those
shields.
Reddit threads, right? Like, versus shield. That's was nonsense. But we still have a lingering hangover of that being good now. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if I'm asking like just remove Sigma's shield and make him an alternate Roadhog. I don't know what I'm asking necessarily, but those are just some like generalized thoughts. So you guys can bounce off from there.
So I want to just say one thing to the Hog point. Did you ever play the experimental card that came out of 132?
Yes, quite a bit actually.
What did you think of the Hog change? His little fart gas thing.
That is like a reasonable style of I do something that, like an interaction that is meaningful that would definitely help him. So
yeah, I liked it too.
If they put that in the game, he still wouldn't be broken now. I think that's how bad it is to not do all those other things those other characters do. I don't even think it would be busted if they put it in as is, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think I think the way Hog. So here's I think one of my
for
most
the viewers, sorry to interrupt. For the viewers, I believe it healed your team a little bit, and they had a portion of the damage reduction. Am I correct?
Like a little circle around.
It was like a little cloud gas, like
yeah.
Fart shield or whatever, fart healing or
a little fart gas thing, to give you a buff.
And it's the type of cooldown that feels kind of skillful to use as well. Like, it feels, like whatever. Keep going.
Yeah, go ahead, Platts.
Because you got to time it for it not to suck.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things that annoys me most streaming and playing is when I'm losing to like Hog Ball comp. and people are always like, "You're losing to Hogball, love it." And it's like, dude, you don't understand why we're losing to Hogball, because there's a lot of people in Overwatch, and this is why like teams like Clockwork and Vendetta came out of nowhere. Is there's a large majority of the player base that are very used to my standard Overwatch. Like I expect my 2 tanks to be either be Ryan Zarya, Winston Diva, Ball Winston, or like double shield Orisa Sigma, and I want them to walk up to their shields and smash into each other while we kill things, and that is how the game's played, and that is my Overwatch. But when people play like weird stuff, like Ball Hog, you've got like a Hanzo's constantly on the flank, you've got a Junkrat who you can't see, who's in spawn, who's throwing nades over the roof at you, like stuff that you're not used to seeing, people can't really adapt to it, right? And this is where I think, to like Forgiving's point way earlier about like new players, some new players don't adapt the same way that old players have seen maybe 5 or 6 different types of metas can, because against really spread comps like that, they want you to take the 1v1 duels constantly, right? Like their DPS have no shield, right? Their way of winning is baiting you on the flank to go take the duel with them. And if you lose, you've just costed the team fight, right? Because, at that point, you're kind of lose your advantage, right? Like, let's say you're running double sniper, double shield versus double sniper, hog and ball, right? Your double sniper, double shield should win every time, right? But if your snipers are constantly taking those flank duels and losing, you're going to lose that game, right? And fundamentally, the reason it's kind of like, why do you lose that, right? Hog and Ball promote that weird flanky on their own play style, and there's nothing totally wrong with that. It's just not typical standard Overwatch. And I think the reason why it works is because Hog doesn't really work in standard Overwatch that well. He can. I mean, me and Six duoed the other day and went like 10-2 or some shit, like running like Hog Rhine, right? But like, that's because he's a top tier Hog, and like I can sometimes make Rhine work in certain weird situations. But in a traditional sense, you're just handicapping yourself, because Hog doesn't bring much to the fight other than raw damage and one shot potential of a hook, right? So I think like the way you kind of bring him more in is, I like that the idea of like him having something that kind of like gives like a little debuff around him, or a buff around him, to giving everybody like a little bit more of a standard of being able to survive as a team. But I will say, I do think Hog requires way too many people to kill him at once. Okay. And I think that's like, as a tank, I'm taking that from a tank perspective, is there's always that annoying Hog on the flank. If you don't have 2 or 3 people with the right kit to kill him, whether it's the Ana with Sleep Nade, that's probably the best one. Your Break can bash him if he's healing, which is nice, or anyone else can stun him out of his healing, which is nice. But unless you have that combo to kill him, he gets a lot of value on his own. And I think like that's a weird area where he's both bad, but also not fun to play against sometimes, right? So where do you find that balance? If I was going to do something to him, I'd probably give him that buff, to give him like a buff to all his teammates around, a little fart gas thing or something similar or comparable. But I would probably lower his HP a little bit to compensate, because you'd be wanting to pick a playstyle, of like more team based versus more solo queue based. Because I hear you on the whole idea of like, they want to promote other playstyles, and Hog is that playstyle of like on your own as a tank. But I feel like all the DPS players and support players, you see someone on your team lock Hog, and even as the other tank, you're kind of like, uh-oh, this is not a good situation,
Mhm.
And how do
For
you
sure.
kind of counteract that? Because they're locking Hog to probably have more fun and probably have their own playstyle. But as you get higher up, or even in low ranks too, I'm sure they have the same issue sometimes where, but not to the same extent, where you're all of a sudden now at a disadvantage unless they're playing perfectly, right? If they play
Well, if
perfectly,
his
you'll
stats
be
were
okay.
better, I agree with everything you said. Really well said. But if his stats were better, you wouldn't feel that way, right? Like you got to remember,
100%.
we thought that of Genji a couple weeks ago, right? Where it's
Mhm.
the same thing. If you could solve any problem with stat buffs and power creep, not saying that that's necessarily good, because like you said, he is annoying to play against. My rebuttal to that, though, is that you're right, but I think we as players, I think almost it's because it's a niche thing that you don't deal with often. The sort of the FPS mechanics that you're talking about of duels and decision making, where the best way to counter that hog on the flank is to go attack his team and realize that you all chase him. So you have to math out, okay, how much damage sources do we have to kill this 900-esque effective HP and possibly more with damage mitigation. If we can't win that, then it's a resource drain, and he's making space the same way of like pumping cooldowns into a ball that has 1,000 HP and then he gets away. It's like the same problem, right? Where you just drain all those resources, and that's what he wants you to do. I feel because it's off meta, people fall victim to it more, right? Whereas if like I would say I want more characters like that. So that's my point. Like I wish the tank category, that was my point to like open queue and damage, right? Like there isn't the tank pick that exists to say, all right, teamwork's not working. Let me like try to pick a mechanical based hero to FPS my way out of this. That's just not an Overwatch thing. And maybe, more players agree with you that like, well, we don't want that. Like, we don't want ball hog we don't want like 3 more ball hog type of character options like Freedo wants. Maybe that's just where it falls down to. But I think it's more fun personally. I think it works better for solo queue, especially as well.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I want to first let Forgiving speak if he has anything, because I might go on for a while, and I want to lead on to something else as well. So Forgiving, if you got anything.
Something really quick. So when we were in a meta before this Sigma came out, it was pull pork meta, right? We were in Orisa hog meta. Orisa and hog synergize very well together, but then they replace hog obviously with Sigma introductions to the game, kind of pushed him completely out of the meta. So I feel like it's a lack of having a very good tank duo for Roadhog in the current state of the game, and we need a character that enables hog in a better way than just ball overall. That's where I'm kind of like going.
Combo, which is hilarious.
I know. That's why I'm kind of weird.
A solo tank. So that is a good point.
So the first thing I want to add, and the most important thing, is I know that the common term amongst the community for the ball hog is the ball hog torture, but I would like to start the petition now to rename it to the meat bowl. Is another term I heard used for it.
Oh my god!
So that's that. The second thing I'll say is that this is like a really interesting topic. It's something I've been investigating recently, actually, because playing ladder, it's really struck me how the frustrations, like, because I've been doing some unranked GMs, I see a lot more like the frustrations throughout the ranks, and I think the most common thing that most people have when they come to me is always the teammates. Right? It always comes down at the end of the day to the teammates, like, oh, SVB, my teammates suck, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to play, I'm trying to tell them, but like 3 people aren't in voice chat, 3 people aren't listening, 1 guy's throwing. And that's both the beauty of Overwatch and also sometimes why Overwatch sucks really badly to play, is that sometimes your teammates just completely cost you the game. And so I've been trying to like investigate this idea of like what would Overwatch look like with less teammates. So recently I did some like experimental pugs with the people in my Discord, where we played 4v4 and 5v5 on the regular matches, on the regular maps, with the regular competitive rule sets. And there was a lot of interesting things came out. One of the most striking things was how dominant Roadhog was, basically. He quickly became like a must pick because he can pick, he can do damage, he self-heal. He's like got everything you want in a sort of solo hero. So on that one hand, there's very clear potential that like just for a few things changing and Hog could like run wild. And I think that is kind of the point that Flats is alluding to as well. Like, it can be really difficult to play against a Hog who's flanking and no one deals with him. And in a way, he feels a little bit like Pharah to me, where it's like, Pharah has this really weird hard cap, where like, you play Pharah until Diamond, and you just wreck people. Like, Pharah with Mercy, you just wreck people, and there's just no answer in the entire lobby, right? If like, the other team doesn't have like a really good hit scan, which they probably won't, like, they probably won't have a good enough hit scan to pluck the Pharah out the sky consistently, you're just gonna win. And sometimes it feels that way with Hog, where it's like, you can just get in a plat lobby, play Hog, and like if nobody looks at this guy, it's GG. Like he's gonna pick someone every single game. But at the same time, he hits this like hard ceiling where you reach like Master, and everyone's like, oh, I'll just pick Ana then, and that he's dead. And he's in a really weird spot for that reason. And to the points that you guys are making about him being like this great solo tank, and I agree. Like, I do think there should be more tanking styles, and this is where my second hero Ball comes in as well, because he's just like amazing as a solo. He's basically as Flats kind of said earlier, he's like the only really tank in Overwatch right now suited to just solo tanking all the time. Like if you didn't have a partner with Ball, he wouldn't give one fuck. He would just be the same exact hero he is right now, which means that there's a really good spot for him somewhere. But where's that spot in 2-2-2? And that's where the difficulty lies, right? Like, that's where, I mean, before 222 came out, I was a little bit like, I don't know, it's really going to restrict what we can do in terms of comps. I'm not really sure about it. And I still think it's like it's done a great job for making the games better for the community, but it's something that's really hurt the community in that sense. About like, well, I just can't play solo tank ball now. And I agree with Freedo, we do need different tank playstyles. And so I'm gonna ask you guys a question which I think every tank player kind of wants to know or what feels in some way is, how do we make tanking more fun? Right? Like how do we make more people want to play tank? Because we're talking about the specific balance of tanks, but behind all this, one of the biggest problems is just that people don't want to play tank. Like full stop, people just don't want to play tank because it's not fun. And when they do want to play tank, they want to play ball and hog because they're the solo tanks. That you don't have to like, you don't actually have to
do a bit.
Zarya too a bit. You don't actually have to eat a shit ton of damage for your team, and you don't actually have to sit there and shoot halts into the nether and hope that someone follows up on them. These are the tanks where you actually get to go in on your own and like get picks and have fun. So how do we make tanking more fun? Is it like new tank heroes that are different play styles that are like, you know, that have interesting different styles, or is it like some buffs, some changes, like remove Roadhog? What is it? What do you guys think?
I sort of gave my answer. I'll give a small one though. I think so. Like I said, I like, you know, more FPS tanks for sure would be nice, or at least the ones we have make them better. The other thing I would say is that like commit harder with design on the playstyle and make it work for the context of the game. So elaborate sentence, but Reinhardt having steadfast finally did that, right? Like Reinhardt had years of just being bopped around, and even like it took an entire GOATS meta of characters to support him to make him meta again. Like before that, it was just dive all the time. It was like, Ryan, we'll just push any button towards him and he's just out of position. And he still had that in GOATS, but there was just so many abilities that pumped into him that like, that's one fun thing about GOATS Ryan as well. Like it was super aggressive and it was like active. It was like you're on a roller coaster or one of those spinny rides. Like that's how GOATS felt as Reinhardt, because just there's all that stuff going into you. But anyway, like the steadfast help him play his role, right? And that's something that's in Valorant quite a bit, actually, to their credit, that they characters do multiple things in Riot Games, but they try to do one thing really well. And I think that's an example of Blizzard doing that with Reinhardt. And I wish they did that more. Like we're just going to say, we're going to look at the whole state of the game, and like Roadhog, he's going to be the guy who's like Widowmaker, where maybe they make his abilities harder to hit, but they better work when they go. Whereas now I feel it's like, you know, unless you're 6, like you're not going to do it, basically. Like it's just too hard. And so
he's like an AI.
That would be the direction I would go. Go ahead.
I don't know how he does. He's like an AI. I don't know how he does it. Seriously, it's wild. He changes his account name so often. You just see a hog on the flank. You're like, oh, it's some hog, and then he just hooks you out of nowhere. And it's like, was that 6? It's most likely him, actually.
He's very good. I played against him. It's annoying.
And to your point about Ryan, oh, I can't wait to get to Ryan. I'm gonna lay into that one. But to answer your question of how to make tanking more fun, this might sound kind of dumb, and I'm gonna realize it's gonna sound kind of dumb because that's just kind of who I am. And I think honestly, one of the most basic things you could do to make tanking more fun is there needs to be some type of response from the game when you do things correctly. When I do things correctly on Ryan, I only know it in a few ways. I hit Q and everybody falls over and they die. Or B, I do some type of my ability, whether there's a fire strike or something, and I see someone died. That's the only ways I get any kind of feedback, right, from the game. And do I know exactly how? Not totally, but when you play Widowmaker, when you click on someone's head, you get the kill. The thing shows up. It makes the noise, like the elimination noise, the tink noise. You know that you just killed someone. You popped off. You did good. And if you get 2, you get the double kill, triple kill, whatever. The game is giving you constant feedback of you're playing well. When you're playing well on Orisa, if you didn't shoot them, let's say like you pulled them behind the shield, right? Like especially let's say Doomfist meta, that Doomfist shield double meta we had, when you would do the pull punches, you didn't get credit for those kills. But you did your job correctly, right? Like you set them up to die. But there's no response from the game to make you feel like you did anything correctly. You just have to know that you're doing it correctly, right? So how would you implement into the game a way to like kind of like not only teach people what's correct, but also reward things that are done correctly, whether it's like staying alive, more bonuses, like not exactly like an old charge bonus, but something that the game rewards you in some sort of way, like, you know, whether it's an audio cue, a visual cue, or something where the game's recognizing that, hey, you're doing your job as a tank, you're doing damage, you're surviving, you're not dying. It's something pops. Do you get what I mean? And that's something on such a basic level, and something I think is honestly kind of hard to think of in what way you would implement it. But you know, support even the same thing. Like you think of like Baptiste's right clicks, like you hear the noise when it hits teammates as they're getting healed, like the little up noise. You know what I'm talking about? Where you constantly get a feedback of I'm doing something right here. And like I said on Ryan, if I'm not hitting something, if I'm just taking space or moving space or not dying or shielding someone off or whatever, you don't get any kind of feedback from the game. I think that on the most basic level would be a way to kind of bring people into the role. Because honestly, there's tons of things you can make, you know, that are better, like, oh, you know, make tanks more powerful, or, you know, they tried the whole loot box thing, that didn't really work. There has to be something that says to me, at least I think, that when I play the game and I'm playing well, I need to have like there should be some type of reward of me playing well. I shouldn't have to constantly feel like I'm explaining to people I'm playing well because I haven't died in 7.5 minutes, not because, you know, like I've killed everybody. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's such a different dynamic where it's not as easy to say holding space and taking space. The game doesn't give you any feedback for that, as opposed to healing or damage, which you get feedback for. That would be probably my number one for getting people to want to play it, or at least enjoy playing it again.
Yeah, so going into that, you're talking about feedback for good like things that you're doing. Like right now, you do get like on fire meter for like hitting a Orisa hold and someone dying off of it, for example, and like that's some feedback in a way. But they need to have more like things like that. If you block a shadow, you should get on fire for that type of deal. So I get where you're going with that. Overall, I think for the overall making the game more enjoyable for tanks is making us feel less pigeonholed into like our hero picks. Because if you don't pick that Reinhardt or you don't pick that Orisa or Sigma, a lot of people are going to be flaming you in voice chat. You don't want to be in voice chat. It's not an overall fun experience for you. A lot of people that end up playing ball are not in voice chat for a reason. They even have match chat muted, probably even yada yada yada. So they don't hear, oh, report our ball, he's throwing, he won't swap. We need to make it that characters overall, like it's more open minded when we approach the game as a whole. Even in lower elos, I've been in plat games before doing unranked GMs or whatever. I see that ball out of voice chat getting flamed before the game even starts. Let people do what they want to do and try to just be like less harsh on people overall. Like I get they're not doing anything, but you have to keep in mind people play this game for fun at the same time as it's competitive.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
also, if you're not at the highest levels, like there's no meta. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's sort of a meta, but the meta revolves around what people are bad at, not what is good in the meta. Like
exactly.
And also perceived meta is another really strong one.
Big.
True.
Yeah. It's something we're always going to deal with, I think, unfortunately. One character that I think is really good at what Flats was saying is Zarya, right? And I think she's like the mold of what I'm talking about, with maybe a good mix of what we both want. Like I'm fine with more solo play stuff and pop off characters for tanks as well. I think that should be introduced. I'm hoping Maga is that guy in Overwatch 2 when that comes out. But Zarya is one that is both the FPS character and has tanking and gives you constant feedback of everything. Now, granted, we could get into the depths of like, well, sometimes you actually shouldn't have charge and you should have held that bubble for a key cooldown interaction. We get into the weeds with that with like high level play. But in terms of like the just mechanically performing the character on a in a consistent team fight, there's a lot of feedback of like, if I'm blocking damage, I get charge, I'm stronger. It's that feedback loop. Whereas with Ryan or Winston, I mean, we got to talk about staging. We can talk about positions and angles and what your team needs to do. And it's really not about you. It's about setting them up. And there's all those arguments about space, which is beautiful to me. But I think that's why I come back to like, let's chill out with trying to redefine what an anchor tank is and try to recreate these other, like, let Winston and Ryan do that. And then, you know, let's have more other interesting things. Cause I feel like they've struggled to develop that. And Orisa has failed in like one way or the other, where either she was bad and people are like, well, let's make her cool. And well, not that cool. Hold on, not the best tank in the game now. They can't please everybody with it. Whereas I think if more tanks were like Zarya, like let's just imagine a world where it was basically all off tanks, right? And tanks were just another FPS character. Well, you might not feel so precious about having the exact tank you want, right? If more of the cast felt that way. I don't know what that means on an esports or team-based level, but playing with randoms, I think that's much better, and it would incentivize people to queue into tank. Despite, admittedly, I love those team play aspects of it. I just think it's overly emphasized in like the median of the design of the game right now. So we'll see how that goes as time goes on, especially with the sequel, which we're going to get an influx of characters. We have tons of Overwatch characters, but it still feels like there's not that many tanks, especially when only a couple are like good at a time anyway.
Yeah,
because they're partnered. Like you're immediately like kind of forgiving said before, like you're pigeonholed in one of two ways. You have meta, and you have what the other guy's playing. Like if the other guy locked ball, I am much more inclined to either play Orisa, D.Va, Winston, or Hog. But I'm not a good Hog, so I don't do that. But everyone else, like that's what you're now inclined to play. You don't really play Ryan. Sigma, I guess in some ways, Sigma Ball is actually not that bad. You're kind of like you're putting in a different way. Like you're now going to be forced to play that play style because it's better to all in on something that maybe isn't the best comp or the best idea than to try to have 6 people have their own ways and not work together. Because I think the East Coast mentality of ranked has always been, it doesn't matter if it's stupid if you do it well. Like just do something stupid together and you'll better chances of winning than trying to play perfectly like separate. I'll take the best Junkrat, Sim, Hog player, Brig player, and Moira player on my team versus a team of like 4100s that play meta. We'll probably beat them. That's just kind of how it's always been. So I think that's something that kind of makes it feel like there's not many tanks in the game as well, as of course there's just isn't many. But like every game you're going to be limited, and then you have the map limitation as well, where let's say that person picks ball and you're playing on King's Row. Well, you're probably not playing D.Va or Winston anymore, so you're probably playing Sig, Orisa, or if you're feeling lucky, Ryan, and you're now all of a sudden on 3 picks instead of the DPS are at 15 picks.
Yeah, and I think that again goes back to what we spoke about earlier, where the tank picks are a lot more rigid. Like you would never think like that when you're picking DPS, or at least it seems like no DPS ever does. They never think, my counter DPS picked Hanzo. Perhaps it would be correct of me to pick Widowmaker and let's go for a double sniper. It's always like, nah, bro, I'm locking the Sombra. I don't give a fuck, right? I think there's that duality of tanks, like coming as pairs, is definitely one aspect of it. In fact, a big aspect of it. And the feedback thing is a really good point. I think it's really important. Maybe what we need is like one of those Dance Dance Revolution things where it's like perfect every time you do something good on the screen, like a little thing pops up.
I kind of like that actually. That's
every time you land a halt that gets like enough people or something. I don't know, but
Ryan as a voice line, like trash talks to their Ryan. People would love that if they could.
Yeah, Twitch chat. Talking about the Twitch chat where like they want Ryan to just shit talk whenever he blocks the shadow, or like, yeah, I mean that kind of stuff is fun. Exactly. Or like when Winston, like, I don't know, let's say, I mean, even if he blocks a shadow, it should definitely be like a voice line for that. Or like when he Goomba stomps somebody. Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff might be helpful. I also agree with Freedo. I think more playstyles are necessary, because I think if you think about it now, what we have is a lot of DPS players playing Ball and Hog because they don't want the long DPS queues. But if they had heroes that they could relate to more fundamentally, they would want to play tank more, right? And I kind of made this argument before where it's like, with support, take support for example, right? You have so many like Widow hit scan mains converted to Ana, like people who have great mechanics who want to play Ana because she's fun still, and she still channels that ability that they have. We need that for a tank. Obviously, it's not immediately obvious how that would come about, but I believe in Blizzard. They come up with cool creative heroes. I'm sure they could come up with a hero that uses like more hit scanny mechanics to tank somehow, right? Like, it's not on the top of my head. Chat, I'm sure you got wild ideas, go crazy. But I think that's quite important. And I also think dynamism is important. There's another thing, it's kind of something that Freedo alluded to with Zarya, is that she's a dynamic character, right? Like her value changes drastically based on how you're playing the character physically. Not just like a good Reinhardt will make space. Literally, like if you build charge, you're like a 10 times scarier Zarya than a Zarya with no charge. And I think that just generally, even for like the entire roster, I think is great. Like I think I had this discussion again when we did the support debate. I kind of suggested this for something like Lucio, where it's like the difference between the healing of a plat Lucio and a GM Lucio isn't there. Like whether, unless they're amping or not amping, they're healing the same output all the time. Same for Mercy. Like if you hold left click, you're healing the same amount every time. It would be interesting if, depending on what you're doing, the healing output changes as well. So like if you're wall riding as Lucio, you're healing more. If you're GAing as Mercy a lot, you're healing more, right? There's some sort of build mechanic to it. So I think that could be cool for tanks as well. Like instead of having tanks that have a set amount of shields, maybe your tank has to build shields by how they play, right? That's like one option. Or just things like that where how you're playing will give you a visual, like will give you more power, right? If you're doing the right things, you'll get more power. So that could be cool. I would like that. And I think let's just not throw 20 CCs at tanks all the time, because that's something like the problem with tanking as well. Like obviously we've talked about power creep, and there's also CC creep. That's a whole nother thing. But the brunt of that comes on tanks, which is, as we've all been there, where you're just like walking around as Reinhardt, and then suddenly you get bash, flashbang, slept from nowhere, and then like you're dead, and you're bearing the brunt of the CC. So maybe something to deal with that as well. More cleanses might be nice as well, actually, or CC immunity things. But anyways, I've ranted enough. Any thoughts before we move on to the roster, to getting through the roster some more?
When we're talking about making tanking more fun overall too, another thing that I know that Overwatch has, I believe, said that they would never want to separate the tank role in general to main tank, off tank, and distinguish that overall. That overall bring more enjoyment to, I believe, most of the player base, because a lot of people can find those off tanks relatable, like Roadhog, Zarya, and feeling like they're having a good time playing those characters. And then some people are scared of queuing tank because they're like, maybe I won't get a main tank, then I won't have fun at all, in terms of that. So that becomes a problem on its own.
Yeah, it's a good point.
What if main tank queues are, like
Yeah, that's
Queue
the other
times is
problem.
it's not the queue time. It's like they stretch where that player goes. So all of a sudden, the closest main tank you can find in your top 500 game is a diamond main tank. That's the only.
Yeah,
it's an extreme example, but that's already kind of happening now, right?
it does happen already.
I hear what you're
there's
saying.
about 8 of us left.
It's just a concern. Like I don't know if they have an answer necessarily. And oddly enough, a lot of people have made comments about this, of the tank development over time, where that distinction has kind of been blurred. But oddly enough, somehow, despite it blurring, we're in a world where like all the shields are good at the same time, where you can just sort of mix and match the shields. So anyway, I don't know how to solve this necessarily. So you could solve one problem, but you kind of create another.
Yeah, it's a rough thing in general with tank right now.
My solution is just nerf Brig into the ground. Let's see what happens.
Flats has just been
I think we all like that.
Vying for blood since the start for Briggy.
She just does too much. She's too easy. Like she can't do. She does everything at once.
When I think about general my life, they get solved by deleting Brig. Like if I whatever you come up with, it's like, oh, I'm not feeling this well, didn't sleep that well, whatever, just nerf Brig and
Corona, delete Brig.
Yeah, Brig being removed overall will allow us to play faster in general, and then we're overall enjoying the game a lot more. So that's the easy way to put it. Scared of less CC, we're not getting blown off that CC. We are allowed to play dive comp, which is faster paced, instead of sitting there with 2 shields, shooting out their shields, turn off our brains, whatever.
Although I would add to that, and as much as I 100% agree with you guys, that wouldn't actually change the meta for the majority of the player base at all, or it wouldn't change any of these problems for the majority of the player base at all.
They're not very good at Brig.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just the point being that that this would change the meta at GM, but it wouldn't do shit for like why people don't play dive comp in Diamond, for example. But speaking of dive, I think I've kind of touched on Ball. Like I said, he's great in a solo tank position, but unfortunately, like you just can't in Overwatch right now. He might try. I really do want someday to return to a non-role locked Overwatch. I hope that happens. So in that case, I think Ball is really fine in most ways, right? He's like another character who's like super annoying to play against if like nobody deals with him. He's like rolling people around all the time, just slamming the supports up in the air. He's just like he's a nightmare to deal with, but he's not meta because you have to pair him with another tank, and if you're pairing him with another tank, well, there's just better tank pairings, right? So he's in a bit of an odd spot. I don't really know. I don't think he needs a buff personally.
balance
No.
like Winston. It's weird that I think we all said we agreed that the best combo with him is Hog, and that's just because he's like another DPS. Like, or ideally, you would like that to be a real DPS, but the best you can do is just have multiple damage sources. Or Sigma's pretty good with him as well, I'd say, because he's again kind of breaks that. He's a damage dealer as well. I like Ball. I don't think anyone wants him to be any better though. To be
No.
real.
Yeah.
He's the
Exactly.
best thing in the game, hands down, in my opinion. It's not even close. Like, if I was a better ball player and I was getting rolled a game and I had to like quote unquote hard carry, I'd go Ball every time. Like, it's just he does so much. Like, if you can get 3 or 4 people off of your team, get 1200 HP and roll around and kill something, hey, that's a W right there. But
He is my favorite character, and I think he's pretty underrated as well. But just similar to Winston, it's like the plays he has to execute to get him to work. It's like, well, if I displace their shields and get them out of there, and we perfectly combo on the right thing at the same time to burst through all the sustainabilities, like then he can work. But then I'm just like pretty much making like a Roadhog argument. If I never miss, like yeah, well, that doesn't really work. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so any other thoughts on Wrecking Ball before we move on?
Good tank.
Flats loving
Nope.
it. Should have picked Wrecking Ball, Flats. But I guess you picked your true love. That
I'm just bad at ball. Emong likes to make fun of me for it.
Opinions
fair.
on the double boop situation? Do we?
Oh yeah.
I'm
So-
glad.
Boring topic, but
So do you want to just quickly, actually for chat, do you want to just explain what that is, Freedo?
there was some tech. I think there was ways to manipulate being able to do it though, but they have
You make
since
it a quad boop. Mhm.
Yeah.
well, you could manually cancel with just your hands, right? You could manually like I think like on Route 66 particularly is pretty easy one to do. Like if you have a long enough grapple, you could get the first boop and then very quickly like stop your momentum but regain it at the same time. It's kind of hard to explain, but you're like canceling it to reactivate the fireball to get a second boop. So it was very difficult to pull off if you're doing it manually, but people have figured out ways to do it with aid, either with macros or something. I'm not
Macros,
exactly.
yeah.
So that obviously is broken, right? Like that's like hacking basically. But
I think there was something
don't-
about using controllers for it as well. I read somewhere
Yeah,
You
like
use the controller emulator and it would move it at a certain degree for it to be perfect every single time. I know we're talking about ball GDH or whatever.
yeah.
Showing this on his Twitter and everything.
Yeah, that's its own thing. But I thought it was a bug, to be honest. I'm glad it's gone. Like it's like take like Ilios Well type of situation. Like I had that happen on like Oasis. Not the I forget which one it is. It's the one like the high grounds in the middle. That you take the stairs up to, not the elevator jump pad. And you're
Oasis-
basically at choke, and someone boops you off the map, and it's like, what? Like that should never happen. That should not be in the game. So I'm glad it's gone.
City Center, is it City Center? I can't remember. Something like that.
I thought City Center was with the little house in the middle and the jump pad. I could be wrong though.
it is.
Oh, okay. Well,
It's the other one. The other one with the high ground you take the stairs up to on both sides. I don't remember what it's called. I just don't like it.
Gardens?
There's lots
Oh,
of
yeah.
gardens or
I think it was
whatever.
Gardens. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Gardens
you-
University and City Center.
Yeah, you can be at the choke of Gardens and get booped off the map like that. No, nope. I'll take that.
All right. Well, in that case, we shall move on. I know Flat's been rubbing his hands together for a while.
Well,
Flat's go
sorry,
on.
one last
Oh,
point I would
oh
say.
no, go Frida.
I would say we should all be one fear I have. We all talk about deleting Brig and whatnot. I am a little afraid that if we nerf or remove or whatever the wrong thing, Ball's like outrageous because I think like he's like secretly waiting in the wings to be super obnoxious. It's just so to the point now where his kit is all about like confirming kills and there's just more easy ways to sustain and not die. So his play is just like it's one note and all in, and if it doesn't work, then you're like screwed. And you should have probably played something easier. But like I think we forget that what a world would be like. Like if we removed Brig, I think Ball would like need tons of nerfs because he got buffed and buffed and buffed. But in a world where we have all these crazy sustainabilities, so it makes it tricky.
Makes it tricky because there are other counters to ball at the end of the day, like Sombra playing on top of the team, waiting there, like just waiting to hack him as he engages. But it comes down to people being willing to swap to those characters at the end of the day. And a lot of people don't want to play Sombra because it's a lot of like waiting around, looking for that hack on the Rhino or the ball, farming for your EMP, and then you're making the play off your EMP, and that doesn't feel very satisfactory to those people that are playing that character typically.
I think
Yeah,
she's
so go ahead.
different than Brig, though. I think Brig's very easy.
Yeah.
While doing other things well, right? Where Sombra's like a very sharp, and you're losing a lot of other things by picking her. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, I suppose
Shield
that's fair.
pressure and everything. Yeah.
Although, yeah, would she ever allow Bull to be meta? We'd have to let the people better than me play and find out.
That
But
should be the case. As much as I'm like, tanks need to be able to sort of be DPS at the same time for shooter stuff. Ball should never be meta. Like that shouldn't be the case. He should be at the power level he is now contextually, but that may he's on like caution watch or whatever it's called, like danger watch. I'm keeping an eye on him because if the right things change, that might stop being the case and he might be too good.
fair enough. Okay, so here we go. Flats, hit us up. Reinhardt.
All right.
It's
So
your
my
boy.
ace in the hole. Everyone, if you don't know who I am, I'm the Reinhardt guy. Reinhardt God, War God, whatever you want to call me. That's just what I've always been known for. And I forced it in double shield and made it work. I'm someone that is very reasonable. Back when we had that 3 weeks of Ryan Diva meta, I was actually someone who said Steadfast was a little too strong. Give it a little nerf. If that's what we think we needed. And then you hit us with that and also a Shatter nerf. So let's get that out of the way with and just say revert the Shatter nerf because that Shatter nerf is complete trash. You went from taking an ult that's been in the game since release, untouched. It's a 3-second stun. That's a skill ult where we now are in not only double shield, we got Brig shield too. So you have 3 shields, you got to weave it in between. You got CC. You have, just even today, I went to shatter a BAP and he jumped over it. Like, you have multiple heroes that can either wall climb away, jump away, whatever they can do to avoid it. And we're also in a spot where it's one of the only ways you get good feedback from the game to say, hey, look, you did something good. You did something to win the game, you weren't just shield bot make right click. And it was nerfed to the point where it completely changed the way a combo worked, which was very critical to making Reinhardt very strong, which was the swing fire strike, which swing fire strike was enough to kill 200 HP targets. The way the change actually was, even though it's only 0.5 seconds, makes it so that heroes can actually stand up and use an ability before that combo is finished. So, for example, if you shattered an Ana and they were full HP, and you swing fire strike, they will stand up and they will nade themselves to make sure they survive, unless it's like point blank range. If they were like right under your feet, like you can get them, but it's really close. It's an ultimate that's always been considered, in my opinion, skill based, exciting to watch, exciting to use, exciting to play. Honestly, I don't know really many people that thought it was oppressive. The only time it was oppressive is if the other main tank was just way better than yours and just putting you on your back constantly. But I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think that's something that if the other player is that much better than your team's player at that position, then that's deserved. That's the same
Like
thing.
Duel, right? It's like the same thing.
Yeah, Widowmaker duel. Yeah, if their Widowmaker is destroying your Widowmaker over and over and over, you can support him somehow, right? You can go shield him. You can go Winston Diva and try to, or Winston or Diva and try to get on them, or Wrecking Ball. Sigma can shield them off. You could go Ashe and Widow, so you have Ashe with a Mercy Pocket and a Widow, so they have to look out for 2 different people that can one-tap them with a headshot. There's a lot of things that they can kind of get thrown in there, but Widow is still the pick. Like if Widow can click 4 heads in a row, she got 4 heads in a row. Now, there's a lot of people that say like, oh, that's a little oppressive, and I can understand where that does come from, and I don't necessarily disagree with it either. But I think for Ryan, it's his ultimate. It's his ultimate for a reason. You have ultimates in the game like you know, Sigma Flux, which arguably in my opinion is the best tank ult in the game right now. Which, you know, comparably is much better than Shatter now. And Bongo, which is a much more team affecting ult with obviously giving damage boost, but Bongo in the current meta is 10 times better than a Shatter because yeah, you can build a Shatter a little bit faster than a Bongo, but you have to wiggle it in between so many shields and CC that I think that if you get one off, you should be getting those kills for it. You shouldn't be penalized for shattering 4 people and losing because their Sigma shield and Orisa shield were still up because your team can't capitalize on it. I don't think that's totally right. In terms of where he is as a hero, though, if we're at a spot where we've all said, you know what, we're not nerfing anymore and we're only buffing, you know what, I'm pretty reasonable. And I was like, you know what, you can nerf Steadfast. It's a little too much. And Lucio's can't even move you. You know what, give me it back. I want Steadfast. I want to buff it again because, you know, if we're gonna make heroes have their own niches and stuff like that, I think the way you destroy double shield is with rush comp. I think the best way to do that would honestly be buff Lucio more. But if we're not going to buff Lucio because we're comfortable with where he is, Ryan needs something that can't get whip shotted away, can't get pulled away. Like, if he gets pulled away, that's fine. But whip shot, honestly, still knocks him back pretty far to a point, in my opinion, where if I'm advancing and I get whip shot back, like she times it so like my shield hops while I'm going forward, she whips me back. I probably don't have enough shield to do it again, so I probably have to wait it out. But at that point, you've probably lost your chance or your advantage. So if you were going to buff him, I think you'd do Steadfast again. A lot of people ask me if I think he should get his 400 shield back. I thought the extra 400 shield was really good against the previous or the first iteration of double shield before the shield nerfs, but I don't think it's necessary. I think 1600 is fine. I think less shield in the game is good. It's healthy for the game. But I do not think that skill ults or skill plays or skill usages should be nerfed in any way whatsoever. So my number one is it's roll that back. That was dumb. Roll back the Shatter nerf.
Yeah, I mean, you're not gonna find any arguments here, buddy. You're not gonna find any arguments here. I think one of the things that's really dumb about it, beyond the fact that like nobody asked for it, and literally nobody has been like, "Thank you, Blizzard. This is a great change." You touched on it really well there. That obviously the break point that Flats illustrated there, that it breaks, and I actually talked about this in one of my recent Ryan videos about like you can't do the third action anymore. You could do 3 unique actions previously with Reinhardt. You could swing, fire strike, and charge safely. You can't do those 3 unique actions anymore, and obviously the swing, fire strike for killing a target is really important. So beyond that, it changes the power of the Shatter massively. Because not only can Reinhardt not follow up on the people there on the ground, his teammates also now have half less of a second to follow up, right? And that may not sound like a lot, but it actually makes a big difference, because the difference between shattering 5 people and killing them all is now gone, because you can't do that anymore, because they will get up before the time you physically have to kill all 5. So now there's no difference between shattering 2 people and shattering 5 people. I mean, apart from the fact that you've just kind of taken them out for a couple seconds, you're just never going to kill them. You just don't have the time. So it's gone from being a potentially fight swinging ult to now you have, if you want to use it optimally, you have to just shatter 2 people on the flank or like 1 person out of position, right? So now the actual emphasis of Shatter has gone massively from this is my kit as a tank to swing this fight and win the game for my team, to now I have to try and get small incremental advantages with my ultimate, which many other heroes will just press Q and win games with, right? But I have to now try and get an incremental advantage for my team with my ultimate, because it just physically doesn't have the power to do what it used to do. And that's actually really hurts for players who actually, again, if we go back to the discussion of like make tanks fun, you want to be able to feel like you can make a big impact in your game, right? And again, if you're in Diamond and Platinum or something where just making space isn't enough, right? Just making space for your DPS isn't always enough. You don't know what's happening. They don't know what's happening. They don't know you made space. They need the Shatter. They need you to come in, confirm the fight for yourself. You take that away from a player, it's just a massive mistake. It's just a massive mistake. And I could rant about this forever, but I think that really is the only thing I have a problem with Reinhardt right now. I think every other way he's fine. Again, you know, I appreciate Flats' concerns about being whip shot as a brig. I think that's totally fair, but I also think he's fine. Like in most levels of play, he holds his own. But bring Shatter Nerf back. Like, come on, man. The one tool to actually clutch with Reinhardt, and you took it away.
I wonder if this is sort of a compromise idea. I agree with everything that was said. No one really cared that you're on the ground a half second longer. Like no one noticed. Either way, it felt like it was a deserved play. But I wonder if a compromise would be to increase the damage of Shatter then, so that you still got the same breakpoints that you got before, but the stun duration is lower. Like maybe that's not necessary, but I think their reasoning is that they just wanted stuns to go down in the game.
Yeah,
so they
yeah,
just,
I get that.
Scatter shot, buck shot, every stun's getting hit except for like, Wrecking Ball and Doomfist. I don't think they got changed, but
No.
McCree's stun and a lot of those things. But yeah, I wonder if that would be like a way so that he could get the fragging power that Sigma's Flux does, for example, in comparison. The other thing that I was going to say is with Steadfast, it's kind of interesting to me that at the original crazy strong Steadfast value, it felt like Brig or Lucio, and when you ran up on them, you were guaranteed. If you were close, you were killing them pretty much, right? Whereas now, it's like they can get away a lot of the time, where the boop is just enough so that you can't keep swinging and kill them. So I think they got to figure out which one of the, if they want the weak Shatter, then Ryan probably needs to be able to make that play, or if it's going to stay this way where some characters are safe from him, just that little bit, that's enough between you getting a kill and not getting a kill, and Ryan being playable or good or meta and terrible, or really off meta. It's like that play is like so important. I think if they're going to keep Steadfast the way it is, I think they should buff at least the damage, if not revert the stun duration of Earth Shatter, so that everyone likes that effect. Like no one was like, this, why does this Shatter get play of the game? No one was ever saying that, right? Anyway, I agree with the rants that have been previously stated. So that's it.
I feel like overall people would be more happy with being stunned for half a second more than taking a more initial burst damage overall. Just feeling like, oh, I was weak in the backline. My honor forgot to heal me. Boom, I just died because Earth Shatter. They like having that chance of surviving in the back, and I feel like it'd feel less oppressive it just being a longer stun overall. So I think I would
more kill feeds of Shatter kills. So
I like it.
I'm talking about I was like playing against the Reinhardt overall.
I know.
Yeah. So that's where I'm like, okay, I think having a longer stun overall better, because right now, yeah, you just try to shatter one person, like the Reinhardt in general, if they have a Reinhardt themselves, or one or two people. Then you swing once or fire strike once, then you go for your pin. If you can go for a short angle pin, because a lot of time if you go for a longer pin, we know you go and feed whatever you get traded out, it's a bad pin. So
the more we speak about this, the more I'm agreeing with you guys, because if like the enemy had a Lucio in the days where Lucio was played, let's say he dodges it, but the stun duration gives him the opportunity to like make the play to save the team, right? So he like comes in with beat if he didn't get shattered. So you kind of need that downtime. Whereas if it's an instant damage hit, then like you're all just dead. You all explode, right? It's like we don't really want that. Like that stun time was useful for more interactions to happen.
Yeah, because the further you go into that shatter at that max range, the more threat you are of like, they have a less chance to die the further back they are, because everyone shoots whoever's closest to them typically. Like most people are focused on killing that Ryan or that Zarya first in the Ryan Zarya comp, and then they're moving on further back. That Ana or that Lucia that might have got shattered and then can wake up, or didn't get shattered. I mean, yeah, bigger buffer time for them to get it ult off. It feels less oppressive for everyone that got shattered. I think that'd be the way better option overall.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not really about the burst damage. It's not a damage ult. It's a disable ult in a way.
Yeah, especially with how fast Earth Shatter charges, because that's the thing that we could like be technically looking at, is like compared to every other tank ult in the game. Like I think Mines and Shatter are the two fastest charging ults. I'm not sure if you guys can agree on that.
It's up there. I mean, like Tracer's Pulse Bomb, ults for tanks. I think you're right. Another thing I would say when they talk about CC, it's like they nerfed Sigma's Flux, but it's still sick. Like they nerfed it in a bunch of ways and made it a lot harder to use, but it's still like they're all up and they all take tons of damage. Like it's just a better Earth Shatter basically, and you do it. You can get around shields. So anyway, make Earth Shatter great again.
That's a good title.
But go ahead, forgive me. I think you had a thing to.
I was pretty good after that. So I was
I
trying to
like
get out.
a sneaky quality of life change. People always ask me, like, you know what, if we're throwing in the conversation, let's throw in the conversation. Ability to cancel charge. Like, people have asked
Yeah,
if they
I
have
wanted to
it
ask you about this.
because everyone else has like the ability to cancel at this point, except like a few. Maybe like Hog doesn't have the ability to cancel his vape, and that's why I've always said no. Because like, at what point, like, when does it stop? You know what I mean? Like, when do you stop saying like, they shouldn't be able to cancel that? Um, and and I get where people say, that Ryan should be able to stop his charge, because like there are certain things that kind of can like, like bug you out. You know what I mean? Like, a good example was when I was forcing double shield against, or forcing Ryan against double shield, was the Doomfist thing. Because sometimes like Doomfist would be like charging punch at you at like close range, like whether they just come off of like high ground or something, and you had to make the decision of, am I gonna charge at him and counter charge, or is he gonna cancel and then like uppercut away? And like all of a sudden, like I'm now in their backline. You know what I mean? You could have some counterplay to that with like being able to cancel it. And also I feel like that would change a lot of people's opinions of people playing Rhine, because like, the typical just charging in their back line. Like, I feel like you could be like, oh, mistake, and you just kind of stop halfway through. I'm not totally sold on it, but I figured I'd just throw it into the possibility.
Yeah, I'm not, for the reasons you kind of already half illustrated, I'm not for it. I think the fact that other heroes go out and cancels is just that's going the wrong way. I don't think we want to send Ryan also the wrong way. I think the fact that his charge is high risk, high reward is why it's a good ability and skillful ability, because if you connect it, you're good, but being able to cancel it takes that punishment away. Again, it's the get out of jail free card, which we don't want more heroes to have. I think if you want to make an impact as Ryan, you better get it right, and if you get it wrong, then you're punished, and that's how the game should be. Although I do like the idea of what you're saying about like it makes cool baits. Like, you could bait someone. Like, I can definitely imagine baiting Reinhardts into charging you, and like by charging at them, then they charge, you cancel, you then your team gets them. So like there's cool plays there, but I still think that the punishment is deserved.
It would be, but here's the thing about power creep. It's fun. Power creep is actually fun. Like Reaper, Genji, these went from characters when they couldn't cancel. It was like, oh, I'm stuck in my ability or whatever. I mean, Genji had ways to get out of it. He could wall climb, but especially like with the Reaper, like he becomes such a much more fun character. I'm trying to think, like Pharah Barrage probably should be cancelable as well. I'm going the other way. I think like we got to
let everybody
power
cancel.
creep. We're in the power creep era, and like just make it fun and work in the environment we're in, because like it's another button to press, so it is like another decision. Like, yes, you are there isn't that punishment, but the problem we have with the game overall is that like we don't live in a world where both teams are playing Ryan and it's like, no, this is a punishing play style. If you make a mistake, you're screwed. That's not where we live. We live in instead we just play easier things that have like built-in escapes, or you know what I mean, or lamps or brig next to us to protect us. There's already enough of that safety gap surrounding you so that you can't play Ryan anyway. So it's like, I would see it, but we would have to like revert so many layers of power creep back to get us to a world where that makes sense. It might be incredibly broken, but I think Ryan being able to cancel pin would just allow more plays to happen and be kind of sick, actually, and give you another element of control. One thing that I did like when he had the max steadfast buff was that like pin all of a sudden was this like super reliable tool that like you could definitely pinpoint where you wanted and get that kill. That felt amazing. I loved that. And now again, just like with the closing the distance on the brig situation, the same thing is the case where with that little 10%, now it's like, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to land this. And if I'm just off by a little bit, I don't hit it and I'm out of position, blah, blah, blah. Like that. I don't think those all in plays work in the modern age of Overwatch. And we might as well just let, the fun things happen that we want to see in the game by power creeping it along with everything else.
Forgiving?
Yes. So I'm worried. So when it comes to canceling charge, I like the idea overall. I see the play potential out of it. It's a high risk, high reward ability, which makes it kind of scary to change overall, because of like you're making a commitment to getting huge value, 300 damage onto a target overall. And that's where I'm just like, I can understand the playmaking, like, because especially for lower skilled players, because at a higher level, right? we understand you don't commit that charge until you see that Doomfist launch that punch or make that audio cue to launch the punch. You don't do it while he's charging it up, because a lot of high ranked Doomfists use that to bait you. But at a lower skill level, then they can like learn more about that as they progress through the game. And I feel like it like make the learning curve a little bit easier overall for the player base.
It seems like a massive buff, but let's just think about it
Mhm.
for a sec. If we instituted it today, would Ryan just like destroy double shield? I don't even think
No.
I think that, right? So
No.
that's what I'm saying. We're like the power creep era that we're in, because those two tanks are getting a ton more done, taking no risk. So Ryan just being able to cancel out of a risk, it's not like he's gaining anything in that. It's just you know what I mean? It's not like he's
Wait.
building ult in that time, or
convinced now pro charge cancel.
But at the same time, isn't Ren very dominant in low elos? Like you see a lot less Orisa played in low elos. So then it's like, do we want to give a character that's already very dominant in the lower elos more of an advantage?
You say
at the same time?
dominant,
You don't
dominant
balance
pick rate, but I wouldn't say like dominant in terms of oppressive. It's they think
Yeah.
Genji's oppressive. They think
True.
like he's in my face. What do I
Doomfist is
do? I'm
oppressive,
dead.
yeah.
Right? Or Far's in the sky. What do I do? I'm dead. Like no one really thinks Ryan's oppressive. In my opinion, anyway.
But
like, I could
but
be
you
wrong,
are you
but
are you are
even if he
turning
had
to,
this,
you are turning to the dark side, Freedo, because he may not you may not help him in the double shield battle now, but a battle down the road where he'll be power crept, then we're gonna be like, oh goddamn, we shouldn't have given him these 5 buffs to counter double shield. Now he's a fucking beast, and now we need to nerf him. So
My
you've
sweet
gone
That's
to
what I'm worried about.
we haven't been saying.
I know,
for years,
They're never
SUV.
reverting power creep. I know, but I
It's
still
like
want to
the
hold
US
on.
debt right now. It's like you can't just pretend like it matters now. I mean, how many billions and trillions does it need to be? No, we're just everything's on a credit card.
Just go
SVB.
roll with
There's
it.
no
Just
consequences.
roll with it.
Buff
man.
health at this point.
I heard chat like maybe give Winston like a double jump leap, just like so he leaps and then leaps off again. That would be amazing. I would play that Winston, like I would one trick that Winston to death. Just
I
a
always
double
wondered
leap.
why they Diva's boosters, but then not Winston. Like, didn't that like not make sense? I don't know. Like, I feel like if the timers were on the same, right? 6 and 6 for a reason, because they were the same to synergize. At least that's how I originally thought. And now one's at 6 and one's at 4.
He still wouldn't be meta. That's
hell
crazy
no.
about these things. These things sound like insane things, but he needs his bubble so much. Like it would only help like chase down a thing after a jump, and he still probably doesn't get that kill. Like that's yeah. Anyway,
Truthfully, during that 3-second booster meta for a while, did you guys feel that as extremely oppressive personally? I was the one playing Diva, so I can't really tell you.
I noticed the pros did. I struggled to use it properly. I felt like I saw what in Owl, what they were really sick at is just it's being able to spam it all the time. But I feel like the structure of the team fight has to be in a specific way for that to matter. Whereas, and maybe I just wasn't good enough, but like I'm used to the old timings, so maybe it was a muscle memory thing. But yeah, I feel like if you were Fury, who's a famous off tank, anyone in chat doesn't know, that's like just insane reaction times, right? If you were a player like that or Choyobin or whatever, and you had the APM to properly use it, it was oppressive. But again, like
that's just at a high level though, so that's why I was like curious.
Yeah, I actually think Diva's one of the worst played tanks. And this is like a slight tangent, but I actually think she's like of the
I
tanks.
think she has the highest skill ceiling, and a lot of people aren't at that.
I think a lot of people just fundamentally don't even do like the basics. And this is my anecdotal opinion, but like I feel like when most people play Diva, they're just like, I want to shoot stuff, and they don't like they barely understand DM. I feel like DM is just like something they use instinctively when some sort of damage is coming their way. They're like DM, and it's like a Zarya beam, and it's and it's like a Zarya beam, and they just empty it all out, and it's like the Zarya, and it's like you ate nothing, my guy, you ate absolutely nothing. But that's a slight tangent. One thing I want to add on the Reinhardt. Do you guys feel like the hitbox is getting buggy, or do I just suck more? On the pins.
I haven't noticed anything.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
The amount of times in the past like month where I've gotten shattered, like okay, I've had a few instances where I've gotten shattered with my shield up, and like I'm questioning whether or not my mouse is broken at this point, because I never let go and I just hit the ground. I'm like, oh okay. And then there's times where everyone around me is all shattered. And I was like, I blocked it. And they're like, no, you didn't. I was like, yes, I did. And then you watch the replay and you see the shatter come through, and then the shield goes up, and then I don't get shattered, and then everyone behind is shattered. And I'm like, huh? How'd that happen?
Yeah. In the
Like-
past, back when we would have our shield up while we're jumping, even when they hit shatter, we wouldn't get shattered ourselves. And nowadays, now you can get shattered if you are jumping with your shield up. So that's
Yeah, that
changed in a
happens. That's
slight
happened
way.
to me a lot. Yeah, that's happened to me a lot where I get shattered when I'm jumping, and I'm like, oh
I remember
shit.
Jane tested that forever ago. Jane tested that extensively to see if jumping would get you shattered, like regular jumping, and it wouldn't.
Mm-hmm. And now it does, weirdly enough.
But it's not every time. It's sometimes. It's
Mhm.
bullshit.
I feel like Reinhardt, he still has the most inconsistent hitbox. I mean, that's how I feel. I play a lot of Reinhardt, so maybe like I said, maybe just because I suck and I miss shit. But like, I feel like shatters and pins are like so wildly inconsistent sometimes.
Okay,
Yeah, the
you
vacuum
wanna
sucks.
know the secret. I could technically spill the secret for you.
Ooh.
There's a change. There 100% was a change a while. Like I don't know if it was said or what, but it depends on what shoulder you're hitting with. So like you know how like he makes like that like little basket in his hands kind of thing when he's like
Mhm.
pinning.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you have one in that area and above, it'll suction pin them. But if you hit them with the shoulder side, it just boops them off. Right.
Oh
So
my
like
God, you
there's
blow
this
my
weird
mind.
new hitbox. It's like feels much skinnier, but it's taller all of a sudden, where it's much harder to hit. I hate it. It's much harder to hit, but you'll get the crazy suction pins sometimes where like they'll like boop up in the air and then they're above you and then they get sucked in and like they just all question mark you like, oh my God, suction pin. I was like, this is the first time I got one in 2.5 weeks. Like, come on. But I feel like they I don't know if like who changed it or if it actually was changed, but I feel like the hitbox 100% got like skinnier. It's much harder to hit as of like 3
Okay.
months ago.
Thank you for proving that I'm not losing my mind. Like I swear to God, like there's even a command in my chat called SVB pin, which is when you smack them with the shoulder, and I'm just like, I'm convinced that like in like a month ago this would have landed, and I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like literally all my hitbox is on him, but you've changed my mind. You've like blown my mind rather. You've
I
changed
don't
my
aim for the
life.
shoulder. I aim for like the where he has this little basket in his hands. If you aim for that spot, it hits like every time.
You're a god. The Ryan God has spoken, guys. There you go. A little tidbit for the 300 viewers right now. You guys got a little sneak tidbit. I mean, YouTube will get this as well. So YouTube, you guys can shout out to
There goes
Flats
all
for
my
giving us this.
secrets.
Well, I mean, I think it's still relatively closely kept secret. Don't worry. Hush, hush. Don't share. This is like Fight Club now. Reinhardt mains. It stays between us,
Okay.
guys.
Don't talk about it.
We don't talk
Outside of
about
here.
it. Never ever will we ever talk about this again, unless they
And
change
let's
the
not talk
hitbox
about the
again.
countdown either, okay?
Oh yeah, no countdown. Forget about it. You never heard. You didn't hear it from us. It's rumors. All rumors. Alright, guys. This has been great, but I think I've been occupying a lot of your time. So let's get some concluding thoughts. And I'm going to ask you guys one question, which is if you could change one thing about tanks right now, either generally, specifically, or maybe future tanks. You know, like you want X type of tank, just anything tanking related. If you could change it, what will it be? Let's go clockwise again. Flats, you're on the spot.
If I could change one thing about tanking, I think to be
Oh wait,
honest
wait.
with
Did we
you-
do Zarya? Oh, so we missed
No, we
Zarya.
didn't.
Oh
Never
shit,
got to
shit.
Zarya.
Fuck. Let's go Zarya. Let's go.
So quickly on Zarya, I think she's in a great spot overall. It's just an entire shield meta right now. On different maps and different compositions, like when you have a Doomfist and stuff like that, that's where Zarya really shines at enabling also a DPS on top of your Reinhardt currently, and then like May comps, very fast brawly comps. But that all comes down to map dependency at the same time. Like a lot of the maps currently are very long sight lines, and that makes it a little bit harder for Zarya. Like on first point Junkertown, if you're locking Zarya instead of Sig, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage typically in a higher elo. In a lower elo, I understand that Ryan Zarya is more popular overall. You don't see as much Ryan Sig, but you do still see it regardless. And I think she's overall in a good spot. I don't have a problem with her personally.
Insane ranked character. It's only until the enemy knows how to either play dive or double shield where she can be exploited, and that means almost never until you get to a high elo.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like actually, and completely my bad for giving. Sorry, I lost track of who we talked
No
about and
worries.
we hadn't. But like she's like legitimately a character that sometimes it feels like she could 1v6 people like in a brig kind of fashion.
You definitely can.
Like it just feels like, oh shit. Like you just look at her, you see that glowing shit on her back. And
I
you're
think
like,
it's the character that you feel the most rewarded for playing out of the tanks, because you have an energy level that's showing you how well you are doing about getting your energy overall. It's a character that you can get very creative with what you do with your using your right click to get to high ground. There's like little text like on first point Dorado to get yourself on top of the sign up the choke on the right side, and then you can grab high ground using that tech. I did an unranked GM on Zarya recently, and I have like all these like weird little things to enable myself to get in a better position and find damage. And then once you're that high energy and you have a bubble and crazy flanking potential, and a lot of people don't really think about that overall in the character. They're like, oh, I'm Zarya, I need to play with my Reinhardt. You technically don't have to all the time. You can be going for more of a play. So truthfully, I think she's good, but at the same time, it's hard to say if she will be too strong compared to like other tanks as other things get changed in the game. So I'd be keeping my eye out on her at the end of the day.
She goes in that danger list that Freedo mentioned.
Luckily, she's just so fun to interact with. I think
Most people don't mind her being good. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Good Zarya
not
is
too
scary
dangerous.
though.
Yeah. True.
It's funny again, like not to sound like an old man, but it's funny how a lot of these OG heroes were just like really decently balanced. Like obviously we've had metas and stuff, but like, you know, we spoke about like Winston, Zarya, you know, Reinhardt and stuff. Just like they feel right. It doesn't feel like cheap and unrewarding to play well as Zarya, and nobody has a problem with Zarya, I think, for that reason. But yeah, it's kind of annoying how some of the later ones have not been that way.
A lot of those heroes don't have that extreme burst damage anymore, or like that some of the newer ones do, or burst healing, or whatever it is. Like Ryan's burst damage is pin. Like pin's not that good. Like if you hit a pin, it's typically either suction pin or you deserved it.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into a large thing about like Blizzards and their hero creation, but I think it's certainly something to think about and something to consider. And it's interesting with this because she's another one of those heroes in one of those fine balance points where at the pro level, just nobody plays her, and yet, again in rank, she's going to abuse people if you play her right. So I'm fine with her. I don't think she needs any changes. There's a case to be made for her to be made more tanky, but I don't think it's like, you know, that's what the experimental card was trying, but I don't really think that's necessary unless you're trying to make her a main tank, which is an argument for, but I'm not.
That'd create too many problems on itself trying to change the overall aspect of the hero, and then it'll cause more issues with the balance for the game moving forward. And I think they want to just keep it as simple as possible moving forward because we already have so many issues.
Yeah. Agreed. Any other thoughts on Zarya? Oh, go ahead, Freedo.
Yeah, I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to sneak in my answer to your question for the other thing. I think something that Flat said earlier, talking about how like deathmatch comps kind of break the game, and just sort of my overall consensus on where I would like tanks to go is I want a step away from absolute team reliance. So we don't have to get a situation where Orisa's boring but amazing because she has an ability that's great for teamwork. I want us to get away from that. Like, have some of that, but have it feel kind of equal to the Roadhogs and Zaryas of the world, where in that deathmatchy style, like I keep saying SVB every time he's like, oh, I'm going to try Reinhardt and Plat. Well, I would never play Reinhardt and Plat. You play Zarya because Zarya gives you what Forgiven was saying, basically. You save teammates and you carry the game. And that's the thing I think a lot of high level players forget, is that they think of the game in structured play where everyone's doing their role. Whereas most players experience the game in an unstructured way where people are picking maybe even the right hero, but adapting the wrong playstyle or not, you know, whatever it is. Extreme examples like, you know, DPS Moira or something. But everyone has those types of things where maybe as Winston, you're diving the tanks, right? Just like the pick might be right, but if you dive the wrong thing, well, you're feeding and you're not a character, right? Zarya is the type of pick that is both a tank and also like an FPS swing back carry character. And I feel that either the other options in that category are too weak or, you know, don't, or too all in or whatever. So I want to see more design in Overwatch 2 that feels both more Roadhog and more Zarya in there.
That's a good point. Oh, yeah, and let me change the discussion thing. But yeah, go ahead, Flats. I left you hanging. Go ahead, finish your thoughts now.
It's kind of a hard one, to be honest. I don't think there's anything truly wrong with things that the community feel are fun in a lot of ways. I still kind of am mad about the whole, we had a Ryan Diva meta for 3 weeks, and then apparently the pick rates are really high, so we just nerfed everything. and all of a sudden we were right back to double shield, and now we're okay with that. um, like, why aren't we okay with double shield being meta for 2 months? Okay. So if I had to change anything, I think that uh more of like understanding how the game is played, and even if we like know that certain metas and certain comps work a certain way, forcing them once in a while is not that bad. Like we were promised really fast patches, more aggressive patches, and we've gotten those for damage and support. I feel like we're scared to touch the tanks because this is actually, like, believe it or not, one of the most diverse tank like metas we've had in a while. But that's not good though, because we had goats before that and we had double shield. Like that doesn't mean it's good. It just means it's better than us being stuck in just those two comps, because you have Nimbani and Gibraltar, which you can play a little bit of Winston Diva on, or Winston Ball. But if you get in a 4,400, 4,500 game, it's double shield. Like, you can get away with it, a lot of it, but those 44, 4,500 games, there's only maybe about 6 or 7 of those a day at best, right? Because all the contenders and owl players get done practicing for the day. They go home, or I guess they don't go home when they're already home. They get on and play some rank, and like they all queue up at the same time because scrims are over, and you'll get a couple really high ranked games in a row. So like I feel like the numbers aren't there for them, like for like a Blizzard side of like, hey, like they like to look at like how often are things played and how like their win rates, their pick rates and stuff like that. Everyone up top is really forced to play that meta, and it's not fun. You have metas that people have thought were more fun, like Rein Zarya or Winston Diva, and if we're not willing to balance, in a round to a point where those might be more viable, I know it sounds dumb, but if that's how we're doing it, why don't we can we have like 2 months of Ride meta, 2 months of Winston Diva meta, 2 months of double shield meta, and just buff them, nerf them as we go along, and almost have artificial metas like we had with hero ban or hero pools, not hero bans, because that's what we wanted. Where we might play something that the community thinks is fun, and we kind of adjust on whether or not the community is tired of that comp. If we start to get tired of Ryan Zarya, and they hear that we're tired of Ryan Zarya, let's switch it up.
True.
A little crazy,
True.
I know, but
no, I mean, you don't have to come on this podcast and convince us the hero bans are necessary, but I mean, diversity is healthy in a game, and I think tanks get that the least probably.
100%.
Forgiving, what would you change?
The only thing that I would change is still the diversity at the end of the day. Like, it's so tiring of just play tank all day and just like be like, okay, load in, it's a high rank lobby, okay, time to lock the Orisa Sig again, let's have fun here. But I know it's down in the lower elos, it's different. They feel like they can still play other characters at the end of the day, so that would bring me back to the entire main tank, off tank long term, like figuring out classifying characters as they're launched as more of a main tank, like a shielding tank, or more of a play on your own style enabler, not projecting a shield overall. That overall help everyone have a lot more fun with the game, and it would also help with these like double shield metas and making the game feel more diverse in a way, because then it's like, depending on the map, this map will be like a Orisa Hog map, the next map might be in that like cost, that's the dive map. You're getting a lot more different gameplay throughout the match.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair request. Freedo, you kind of said yours, but anything more to add?
Yeah, some good points are made here. I get a little gun shy talking about balance when, as Flat said, we actually have like the most diverse tank meta, because like there's so many good maps for different tanks, and you probably could make an argument to try a thing and it's like got a good enough success rate that it's not a complete throw, because as strong as Orisa are, they're one dimensional. And I think part of the problem that I have is that like the comp doesn't have its it doesn't feel as map dependent as it should be, whereas the other ones are. And the scary area that you get to is then all of a sudden something else is the mainstay. So maybe we just do have to keep rotating it around. The ideal place we would like to see is that tank comps are, it's like the diversity we have, but just like more concentrated, I guess, rather than one king and then a bunch of little backup comps underneath it for specific maps. Like you'd hope that was more equal. I don't know if that ever happens though. I don't know if balance can do that. Is my argument I've made for years now.
True.
Yeah, that adds something interesting, because maybe one potential solution is to have, because this is something Forgiving spoke about earlier, where he said that a lot of the maps that have come out recently are Orisa Sigma centric. Maybe one potential solution is to have maps that are very aggressively in the favor of a certain comp, and then rotating them out much more like strictly, so that you have like a 8-map hero pool, and like in those maps there's some like comps which like this is the dive map, like this is just the best map for dive. I don't know if that's one way of forcing like diversity, rather than focusing on bans, you're just like the maps, and if you have a theoretically ideal balance state, the maps are forcing the comp rotation. I don't know.
Why don't
I
we have
truthfully
map
don't like
voting
hero
as well?
pools. I
Yeah,
like
map
map
voting-
voting. I don't like hero pools overall as a general concept for the game.
But like
What
yeah,
about what ways to curate the maps though? What do you think of that? Or to select, or to like in the lobby vote on it for the people in the lobby that want to play it, or the CS:GO system? You prefer
Being
the
able to queue
random,
for a map.
or just
I
or
would
at least
prefer
veto
anything
some
that's-
maps.
above-
I think being
or
able,
vetoes in StarCraft. I would prefer anything over pure randomness.
yeah, I prefer anything over pure randomness myself, but I still don't think like having like a list of only 8 maps that are randomly still select. I don't think that's good for the game.
Yeah, map pools suck. Yeah, those
Mhm.
weren't good. They're just as bad as hero pools for similar reasons.
Mhm.
They're just clearly arbitrarily decided. And yeah, it just felt like you're playing the same 2 maps again. Yeah, I
Like
didn't like map pools either. But I anyway, keep going. What were you saying?
I said I played 14 Temple of Anubis one day. I almost cried.
Yeah, that's horrible. It's different if you have some influence in that or some say, right? Like if it was Temple versus whatever, like a Koth map, and just more people voted Temple for whatever reason, at least you felt you're not being disenfranchised, and and Jeff is forcing you to play 2 CP. Anyway,
Yeah, I
another
think
rant
that's
brewing
another
if
way
I
of
don't stop
potentially.
myself.
That's another potential way that we could, hopefully get control over our games, which would be nice. Or just, another way of trying to force diversity, which is kind of what both Forgiving and Flats kind of touched on a little bit. But
Yeah, and the meta, because the maps play a significant role. Not as much as I wish they did, but more significant than they have in many, many other metas, I'd say. And as it's been already said, it's really only until you get super high where it's like, yeah, we definitely can't do something off meta. But I think it's much more free for most players, which is a good thing. So why don't we lean into that?
yeah, absolutely. Now, from my end, my concluding thing, there's like more like wishful, naive ideas that I'm like, just take away Roadhog again, or take away or put in bans, but like those aren't really feasible right now, I don't think. So my realistic wish list would just be like a bunch of new tanks that all have different playstyles, which is kind of similar to what Freedo wants, but like I definitely want that with Overwatch 2. I want like at least 5 tanks. I want them all to like do different shit. I want them to really like mix up our understanding of like the rigid tank metas that we have. We spoke about the pairings and how like if you're queuing up and your off tank or your tank partner picks Orisa, I've already self-banned half the hero pool for tank. So I would like a bunch of heroes that really shake up our understanding of like, these are the tank pairings, this is the only way you should do it. And also just have different playstyles so that it isn't just like shield, shield, shield until we fully change the meta and it's like dive, dive, dive. And then different players will be attracted to tank, so I hope that will cure some of the tank queue time problems. And hopefully it makes tanking more fun as well. If anyone has any additional on top. No? We good?
I want a
All right.
hero pool draft. That's what I want.
Hero pool draft? You mean like Dota's draft?
Yeah, but like you draft 10 characters each team. That's what I want.
Oh, right. So rather than having just picking 6 heroes, you're picking like 10 and then you can pick from them.
Yeah, and then you could swap among your pool.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I want in the future. Asymmetrical pick. We're gonna start another podcast if I keep going. So that's what I really want back in the day.
No, we tried
or,
that in my
end of the
Discord
day.
actually, and it worked very well. It was quite interesting. But yes, that is for the great tank debate. I think we've pretty exhaustively discussed everything there is of tanking that you could possibly think. Although, ironically, we still have more we could talk about, I'm sure. But
tank mirrors are often boring. I think that's part of the reason why I said like Ryan mirrors are sick, but that's why I brought that up, because like Orisa mirrors are just god awful, right? Like that.
oh yeah,
It's unfortunate because like Winston or Ryan mirrors were fine, but then they come out with Orisa and Orisa mirrors suck. So how do you fix that? I don't know. The only answer I have is have more tanks and have asymmetrical matchups, because they're
well,
they're the most guaranteed way to have interesting gameplay, I would say. And you don't fall into this like Resident Sleeper shooting at 2 shields.
almost every mirror is boring except for like Ryan v Ryan and Widow v Widow. It's like almost every other mirror is just boring to watch.
It's either boring or like too chaotic, right? Like
Yeah.
a lot of
Like
people don't
Tracer v
dive
Tracer,
mirror
it's like
either.
who's blinking where? Like, I don't even know. Like
Yeah. Like, well, there's 2 teams. They go past each other and kill the backline every time, right? Like that's not, people don't like that either.
Imagine explaining counter dive. Oh boy, I don't want to get into that
God, yeah.
conversation.
The funny thing about the term counter dive is that it's like there's people have 2 completely different understandings. One is where people are like, oh, let's counter dive, and they think let's pick Hog Reaper, and then there's the other counter dive where you're like, no, let's just dive them instead. It's like two completely opposite things.
Yeah.
But anyways, we have, like I said, we've kind of exhausted almost everything, and we still could go, but we've got lives. I'm sure these guys need to do some shit. I need to get some sleep. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, my guys, for joining me. This has been epic. You've given me so much of your time. Chat, I'm sure, completely is very appreciative. I'm very appreciative. Guys, check out every single one of these dudes. I'm sure you already know them. These guys are awesome. But if you type in their name with an exclamation mark before it, you'll get a link of all their socials. So type in that exclamation mark Flats, exclamation mark Forgiving, exclamation mark Freedo. Check out all their stuff. Flats and Forgiving are streaming all the time. So go check out their stream. I've rated them a couple of times, so some of you might have seen them, but check them out some more. They're always really good. Freedo, as you guys always know, is always making videos every day pretty much on Euro Overwatch, so I'm sure you'll be hearing lots from Freedo, and he's always on the group up anyway, so you'll get sick of his face. But thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. We've discussed everything tank related, so yeah, we'll have to find maybe like a regroup in like when Overwatch 2 comes out and see what they did with tanks, guys. We'll see if we're pleased or not.
Good to me.
Sounds good.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Catch you later, guys. Have a good night.